Wow, thank you. Wow. Wow. Wow, what a great presentation. I tell you what, I wish me, Chief Coleman, and Reggie Dupre could move like that. I think he could. Look, first of all, welcome to this beautiful occasion. You know, this is part of our 200 celebrating bicentennial of Terrebonne Parish, the Good Earth. And of course, I'm Gordon Dove, the parish president, and you know, I'd like to announce the council members: Dirk Guidry, Danny Babin. Thank y'all for coming, and Steve Ponville, Steve Ponville, safety director for Terrebonne Parish. Reggie Dupre, and of course Chief Coleman. Let's give him a round of applause for that, Steve. And of course, this wouldn't have happened without Miss Margie Scobie. Give her a round for Margie. Beautiful, beautiful lady. And then Patty Whitney, the co-chairman. You know, we've been given these different cultural and events of Terrebonne Parish to celebrate the 200 years of our ancestors. You know, my family's from here, most of y'all families are from here, and Terrebonne, the Good Earth, is still around. The hurricanes don't drive us out, and there's another one looking at us, unfortunately. And but we will succumb, and we always have. and we fight them back. And this is a great occasion, and Terrebonne Parish was founded shrimping, oysters, fishing, Native Americans, and sugarcane, and from there came the oil fields and the other industry, oil and gas, and we went from a small town to 115,000 people, and a great school system, great place to live, great parks, and I grew up on Leveron Street. I grew up right downtown, Leveron, and going to Leveron Park, and it's great to be a Terrebonnean, and it's great to see this event. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Margie. But thank y'all very much. God bless the people of Terrebonne Parish, and God bless the people of the United States, and God watch over the people of Ukraine, please. Miss Margie Scobie, another round of applause.
Woo! That's about all I can say at this point. Other than saying thank you guys so very much. Oh my God, Terrebonne, I'm so proud of you. I am so proud that you guys took it upon yourself to answer the call. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Again, I want to thank our special guest, Kenneth Morris. Mr. Morris, can you have a stand, please? He is a descendant of Frederick Douglass. We have Michael Cage and James Cage. They are direct descendants of James Cage, who once owned the plantation here. That story will be told about the end of the program. Again, we have Shannon Lear, who is a descendant of Thomas Jefferson. So at the end of the program, you guys will be able to meet and mingle with these people. And I'm constantly networking with them all, especially Shannon and Mike, man. I wear them out, huh? But I thank God for them. Again, we thank you guys for coming out here. We want to thank Mr. Gaudy Dove, our parish president, for putting this on, because we do need to celebrate. Our parish, let me tell you, we were hard hit, but I have to say this: we are resilient. When they say we are moving like what they say, we come like an Energizer bunny. Oh no, baby, we got the bunny beat. I can tell you, we got that bunny beat, because look, we put on everything we had to come back, and eventually we'll come back live and strong. Believe it. All right, without further ado, we have the pledge and also a prayer. Miss Margaret, Hebert. Okay, Miss Margaret is going to do this prayer in French. I don't know, the mic is skipping out, you guys. And Miss Deirdre. Miss Deirdre Greenleaf. All right, Miss Margaret and Pam, come say this pledge. And look, you guys, Terrebonne Parish Library, let me tell you, these people, they came through for us. They definitely came. Thank you, Miss Mary. Y'all give up Miss Mary. All right, thank you. Huh? I don't have to, Mike. What other one? This Terrebonne Parish, y'all. But we got it. We love each other.
Okay.
Can everybody stand for the pledge?
Can y'all hear me? Okay, thank you.
And you guys know it, so you can recite it. She's going to do it in French. A wonderful way of doing it.
Okay. We'll do it in French first. Okay. J'engage ma fidélité au drapeau des États-Unis d'Amérique. Et la République qui représente une seule nation, indivisible, avec liberté et justice pour tous. Thank you.
Pastor Tom Scobie, we need a prayer. What you need? Yeah, I need this one going on. Y'all know it's only God, amazing grace that got us here today. So we want to be grateful and thankful for that. Okay, our guest speaker, I was Miss Barbara Chapman. Okay, I don't see Miss Barbara. Well, look, no one can introduce him no better than he can himself. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Kenneth Morris. Come on, y'all. We got to get a better hand in that. This ain't no just anybody. This is not anybody here. We're talking about somebody that came from somebody. All right.
Thank you, Margie, for that very brief introduction. I didn't know you all were as lit as you are here. Wow. This is incredible. It's my honor and privilege to be with you this evening and to celebrate the bicentennial of the ancestors. As you heard, my name is Kenneth B. Morris, Jr., and I am the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, and I'm also the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. And every time I tell people what my relationship is to my ancestors, not only is it a mouthful trying to say all of those greats, but it sometimes makes me feel like I'm far removed. And you might be sitting there having a hard time trying to imagine what my connection is to Douglass and to Washington. It's like trying to picture what $1 billion looks like with so many zeros. But many people know or knew a grandparent, and some of you may know or have known a great-grandparent. And that's how close I feel to both of my ancestors, because you see, my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglas, to whom I was very close. She lived to be 101 years old. And she met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl. Now, she didn't know that she was going to grow up and marry his grandson, Joseph, but that's what happened. And Joseph is the violinist that you'll see in the photographs. And my Aunt Portia, to whom I was also very close, was Booker T. Washington's daughter. And she lived to be 95. And I remember being a little boy and sitting on my great-grandmother Fanny Douglas's lap as she would tell me what it was like, as she would call him the man with the great big white hair. And I remember sitting on my Aunt Portia's lap, and she would tell me firsthand stories about her father, Booker T. Washington. And when we first started the work at Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, I remember being with a group of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and they were all looking at me kind of like cross-eyed, like, man, you are so far removed, and what does all of this history have to do with my life today? And why are you sitting here talking about these two men that lived so long ago? What's the relevance to today? So I was trying to help them get some context, to help them wrap their minds around the distance between the generations. And I had this thought that I think was kind of profound, that hands that touch the great Frederick Douglass and hands that touch the great Booker T. Washington also touch mine. So in a sense, even with all of those greats, I can say I stand one person away from each man. I stand one person away from history, and I stand one person away from slavery. We're not that far removed from the history of slavery in this country, especially when you consider the distance between the generations. So I'm going to talk to you about two men who were born into slavery. They were born into the most horrific conditions that a human being could be subjected to, but yet through the power of education, both of my ancestors understood from a very young age that education was going to be their pathway to freedom. And we know from our U.S. history that it was illegal to teach an enslaved person to read and write. And so for Frederick Douglass, he would have to steal his education. And later in life, when he was this white-haired statesman who was the first African-American nominated for Vice President of the United States, first African-American U.S. Marshal, first African-American ambassador and consul general to Haiti, first African-American recorder of deeds in the District of Columbia, and the first African-American to have a statue dedicated in his honor in 1899 in Rochester, New York. And they would say, Frederick, I need to know, where did you go to school? Where did you get your education? And having never spent one day of his life in formal education in a classroom, he would respond on occasion by saying, my diploma is written on my back. And he was talking about the 20 years of enslavement and the brutality and exploitation that he endured in this institution of slavery. I'd like to thank a few people before I really jump into this. Again, thank you, Margie, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful celebration. I'm just honored to be here. Again, the library for hosting us, and all of you for coming out, and all of the dignitaries that are here today. Now, and you can bring the lights back up, you know, as these pictures scroll through. Well, maybe halfway up. Beautiful music. Man, that was such a beautiful soul. Amazing grace. You know, every time I meet people for the first time, I get a couple of questions. And the first question that I always get is, so you're related to Frederick Douglass and to Booker T. Washington? Well, what do you do? And they always follow that up with, and it better be good. So I'm going to tell you about what I do as president and co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, an organization that I started with my mother, Nettie Washington Douglass. And then the other question that I get is, well, wait a minute, I know that Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington weren't related to each other. So how is it you're related to both of them? Well, here's how it happened. And as you look through the photographs, it happened on my mother's side of the family. So my mother's mother, Nettie Hancock Washington, was Booker T. Washington's granddaughter. And my mother's father, Frederick Douglass III, was Frederick Douglass's great-grandson. You following along so far? Okay. They met in 1941 at Tuskegee Normal School and Institute, which is a school that Booker T. Washington founded in 1881 at the age of 25 years old. They happened to be on campus the same day. Now, my grandfather was a surgeon, and he had been commissioned down to Tuskegee by the Veterans Administration during World War II. My grandmother had been born on campus in the hospital, but she was actually living in California at the time and just happened to be home for summer vacation. She decided that she was going to meet some friends on campus. My grandfather decided he was going to eat in the student cafeteria, which was a place he had never eaten before. And so if you can get this visual, my grandfather just kind of strolling across campus, and then my grandmother rushing across to meet friends, and they literally bumped into each other. Didn't know that the other descended from an historic family, and they fell in love at first sight and wound up getting married just 3 months later. Wow is right. Probably was a plan there in place to bring the families together. Now, I'm the father of 2 daughters. I do not recommend to my daughters or any of the young people in here that you get married having known only by somebody for 3 months. But it truly was a love story. And when my mother, Nettie Washington Douglas, was born, she was the first person to unite the bloodlines of the families. And she was an only child, so I have the honor and privilege of being the first male to carry the dual lineage. And so that's how the families came together. One of the photographs that you'll see up there are my grandparents on their wedding day at the Oaks, Booker T. Washington's home at Tuskegee. And in that same photograph is my grandmother's brother, Booker T. Washington III. So the significance of that photograph is you have Booker T. Washington III shaking hands with Frederick Douglass III, and thus the families are officially united. So, all right, all right. So Frederick Douglass was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. He was born on the eastern shore of Maryland to an enslaved person, to an enslaved woman, and to a white man. It was presumed that his enslaver was his father. Never had a pair of pants or shoes until he was about 6 or 7 years old. He used to sleep head first in an old corn sack on cold winter nights with his feet hanging out because that was the only way he could try and keep himself warm. He only saw his mother 4 or 5 times his whole life, and that's because she lived on a plantation that was 12 miles away. So in order for her to see her son, she would have to work in the fields picking cotton from sunup to sundown, walk 12 miles in the middle of the night, and then spend just a few precious moments with him until he would fall asleep. And then she would have to walk 12 miles back so she could be back on the plantation by the time the sun came up, because if she wasn't, she was most likely going to face punishment. Now, he did have someone early in his life that showed him some love and nurturing and care, and that was his grandmother, Betsy. Her job on this plantation was to raise the children until they were old enough to really begin their life in manual labor, and that was around 5 or 6. Now, you notice when I talk about Frederick's age, I have to use an age range, because he didn't know his birthday. He didn't know when he was born. The only record that mattered to his enslaver was his evaluation on the family's accounting ledger. There was no birth certificates. So when he was about 5 or 6, his grandmother said, "We're going to go on a long journey." And that journey was a 12-mile walk to the main plantation, the Y House. Now, if you can imagine, it took a long time, and he's scared. He's clinging to his grandmother's skirt. She's carrying him much of the way when his legs couldn't carry himself. And they would finally make that long journey from the street up the driveway to the house, and Frederick sees this mansion, this plantation home is bigger than anything he'd ever seen before. And he wandered off just to kind of check out his surroundings and to look for something to eat. And when he turned back to look for his grandmother, she was gone. And so you have this boy who, as I said, only saw his mother a handful of times, didn't know who his father was. He had 5 brothers and sisters that were strangers to him because he had been separated to him. So he truly was an orphan with no family, no home, and no country. But yet, in spite of all of that, through education, and for the young people that are in here this evening, I'm going to keep hammering on the point of the importance of education and literacy, and you will see through the stories of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington how education equaled liberation, how education equaled emancipation, how education equals freedom, and that is a message that is still as relevant today as it was all of those years ago. And so Frederick had something happen when he was about 8 or 9 years old that he wrote in his first autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, which was published in 1845. He wrote in there that there was an instance that happened in my life that he described as divine providence in his favor. And that was he was chosen from among all of the children on the plantation on the eastern shore of Maryland to go to Baltimore to be the house servant for his master's family. Now, the importance of this move was he was leaving in an environment where he wasn't around people where he could learn to read and write, but now he was going to be in the big city. He was going to be around free black children. He would be around poor white children. But what happened most importantly when he got there, his slave mistress, Sophia Auld, had never had an enslaved person before. She didn't know that it was illegal to teach him. She was already teaching her young son, Tommy, and alongside Tommy was Frederick Bailey, bright-eyed and eager to learn. And then this was his first act of self-liberation. He asked her to teach him. And out of the kindness of her Christian heart, she began to teach young Fred his ABCs. And that was all he needed, was that little spark of light into his mental bondage, into his mental darkness. And the lessons continued for a little while until his master found out about him. And when he found out, he got angry. And he looked at his wife and he looked at young Frederick and he said, "You cannot teach a slave how to read and write, because if you do, it will unfit him to be a slave." Did you all hear that message? You cannot teach a slave how to read and write. It will unfit him to be a slave. He'll be running away with himself. And Frederick looked at his enslaver and he thought, if you don't want me to have this, I'm going to do everything in my power to gain it. And he understood right then and there that knowledge is power. That's a message that we hear today. And education would be his pathway to freedom. And he teaches himself to read and write. He was very clever in the way that he went about doing this. He would pick up a stick off the ground while he's out playing in the neighborhood with the children, the free children. And he would write or scratch in the dirt, "Is this how you write an F?" And they would say, "No, Fred, this is how you write an F." And he would file it away. Then he carried in his pocket, he carried bread, biscuits, and he would trade that food for reading lessons. Also in that autobiography, he wrote, "I was always so hungry as a slave child. I always had this pit of hunger in my stomach that would never go away. And on occasion, when I would get food, the overseer would take cornmeal mush and throw it into a trough similar to what pigs eat out of. And he, along with the other children, would crawl on their hands and knees as fast as they could to eat what little food was in there. To eat like pigs, to eat like animals, because that's what he was considered. He was property. He did not own himself. He was no better than the cattle, the sheep, and the horses." So now if you think about this little boy that wanted to learn to read so badly that he would trade something of such great importance, food, he would trade that for reading lessons. And the kids get it all the time, and they'll raise their hand and they'll say, "Mr. Morris, so what you're telling me is he would rather feed his mind and have his stomach go empty." And so what his master predicted happened. He became unfit to be enslaved. He started to think critically about his condition of oppression and enslavement. And he would say things like, "Why am I a slave? And why do you own me? And how come you know your birthday and I don't know my birthday?" And as he would turn to God and he would pray to God for deliverance from his bondage, from his chains, he would say, "God, I don't understand how my master puts on a suit every Sunday, goes to church, and in the Word and the Bible and cherry-picks scriptures and verses finds justification to brutalize, dehumanize, rape, pillage, and plunder his property." He's starting to early on make this distinction between what he would later call the slave-holding Christianity of the land versus the pure, peaceable, impartial Christianity of Christ. So he's thinking critically, and that's a message for our young people today, to start to think about their own condition. And to maybe ask questions like, why is it because I live in a certain zip code, I have less access to good education, to health care, to economic opportunity, versus someone else born into another zip code by no fault of their own, and this playing field is not starting out level. And so our young people can start to think critically in that way. And now we're facing these issues. I just read just a few days ago that Frederick Douglass's narrative was banned in an Oklahoma school district. And the danger of whitewashing and sanitizing our history so that our young people do not know where they come from, they don't know the history of this country, that threatens our freedoms, it threatens our democracy. And for me, having the blood of Frederick Douglass flowing through my veins and knowing how that narrative has changed people's lives. Since I was a little boy, I had people of all ages, even to this day, and all races come up to me sometimes with tears in their eyes. And they want to tell me, first they want to pinch me on the cheek. They want to hug me. They want to pat me on the head, and when I was a kid, I never understood the emotional connection that so many had to my ancestors, and I never felt like I was worthy of that admiration that I was receiving. But probably about 15 years ago, I was at an event like this, and a woman came up to me afterwards with tears in her eyes, and she said, I read Frederick Douglass's narrative when I was in the 8th grade. I read Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery when I was in college. And those books made me believe that I could do and be anything possible. And if I could thank them, I would. But because I can't, you become the conduit to saying thank you. So can I hug you? Can I give you a kiss on the cheek? And now that I have that perspective, I really understand the importance of my soul and my spirit and how these books change young people's lives. It fosters dialogue in the classroom. It teaches them to be empathetic and to look outside of their own lives at people that are unlike them. It teaches them to be more compassionate. And so I just read this a couple of days ago, so we're going to be working on that, and I'll be writing about that. But back to Frederick Douglass. So at the age of 20, with the help of my great-great-great-grandmother, Anna Murray Douglass, now I want to take a few minutes to say something about Anna, because there would be no Frederick Douglass without Anna in his life. She was the first person in her family born free, and she lived in Baltimore. She worked as a seamstress and a domestic servant. She lived about a street away from Frederick Douglass, who was a teenage boy, and they met. We don't know exactly how they met, but they met, and as they started to care for each other, to like each other, and to think about a future, she was one of the first people to plant the seed in his mind. Frederick, you're not meant to be a slave. Doesn't matter what your master says. You are not a slave. And as they were thinking about a future and maybe having a family together, she said, Frederick, I don't want our children's father to be a slave. Had she not sold her personal belongings to help finances escape, had she not sewn the sailor's disguise that he would wear, who knows if he would have had the courage or the wherewithal to run away. And had he not run away, had we not had the contributions of Frederick Douglass as the great abolitionist and all those other things that I mentioned, we would be a very different country sitting here today. Historians have not treated Anna with the dignity and respect that she deserves. She was a dark-skinned black woman who never learned to read and write, and mostly male historians, I'm going to be transparent, male historians do not see this black woman as being worthy of the great intellectual that was Frederick Douglass. We know that's wrong. They were married for 44 years. They had 5 children together. They had 21 grandchildren. She was a conductor on the Underground Railroad out of their house in Rochester, New York. She helped to ferry hundreds of freedom seekers to their freedom in Canada. She was a radical freedom fighter in her own right, and she was Frederick's equal partner in the struggle for freedom. And so we're working very hard at my organization to lift up her life and legacy and to teach about her so that our young girls in particular can see themselves in these historical freedom fighters. And so Frederick would escape by train and by boat. He would land in New York City, taste freedom for the first time, write a letter back to Anna. She would come and join. They would get married, take on the name Frederick and Anna Johnson. And with the help of conductors on the Underground Railroad, it was suggested that they move to New Bedford, Massachusetts, because Frederick could find work there. He'd acquired a skill as a ship caulker on the docks in Baltimore, and he could find work, which he did. They get to New Bedford. He changes his name to Frederick Douglass, and then they start their lives together. They begin to have children. But now what happens, at the age of 23, he and Anna attend an anti-slavery meeting on Nantucket Island. Now, they just went just to be in the audience, but the anti-slavery people there, William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist, and his supporters, heard that they had what they would have called at that time a fugitive slave. We call those people freedom seekers now. A fugitive slave in the audience in Frederick Douglass. And so they turned to Frederick and they said, will you just stand up? Will you tell the audience your story? Tell them what it was like to be a slave, Frederick. And he wrote again in that narrative, he said, the first time I spoke in front of a white audience, I was so nervous that I was shaken from every limb. But when he stood up, he had this natural gift for communication. He was eloquent. He was charismatic. He was anointed by God to deliver a message. And when he told the story, they all looked at him and like, who is this guy? He's good looking, dressed, tall, strong. And they knew that they had a star, and so they asked him to join the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society as a paid lecturer. He accepted, and he just went from town to town, city to city, telling his story. Well, then he started to have a problem. And that problem was people started to doubt that he had ever been a slave. They couldn't wrap their minds around what they thought an enslaved person looked and sounded like, what they had been told by those that were pro-slavery in the federal government, that these were people of African descent, that were not worthy of freedom, were not worthy of citizenship. Perhaps they're better off in slavery. They're getting some level of measured care. They're getting the Christian religion. Listen to the happy songs that they sing, making a group of people an other. Now, by the way, history is not just about the past. It's about the present, and it's about the future. And the more that we know where we come from, the better we can navigate the world in which we live today. And so I would ask you just to think about that kind of rhetoric that we hear today. They're rapists. They're criminals. They're coming to invest and invade our country. Same type of stuff that happened in the 19th century. And so Frederick Douglass had this problem. And so in order to prove that he was who he claimed to be, he wrote that first autobiography that I've been talking about. It was published in 1845, and then he had another problem. Became a bestseller. Selling 4,500 copies in 3 months. That's the last thing that you want, is the notoriety of a best-selling book if you're trying to hide from your enslaver. But it showed you the courage that he had, because in it he named names and he named places. It made him a household name, an instant celebrity. And so it was suggested by the Garrisonians that he flee to Europe for a couple of years as a cooling off period. And he would travel to England, to Scotland, to Ireland, and then he would land in this place called Newcastle upon Tyne in England about 2 years later. And his supporters there raised enough money to purchase his freedom from his enslaver for 150 pounds, or what was $711. And he was able to come back to the United States a free man. He would move the family to Rochester, New York. He would start to publish the North Star newspaper, which was a leading abolitionist voice. He became an advisor to President Lincoln. And I wish I had time to go into all of it. I don't, so I'm giving you kind of this overview and summary. And then he goes on to be the great white-haired statesman that my great-grandmother talked about. Now, Booker T. Washington benefited from the work of Douglass and the abolitionists, and he was freed when he was 9 years old when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863 by President Lincoln. Now, Booker Taliaferro Washington wanted to go to school so badly after being freed that he would work in the salt and coal mines of West Virginia at night so that he could take his lessons during the day. And one night when he was in the mines, he heard these two older gentlemen talking about this place called Tuskegee, Alabama. And they were talking about a group of people that had raised some money to start a new school for formerly enslaved people. And there was word that got back to Booker T., who by now had taken a position as a teacher at Hampton Institute, that he was their man. Booker accepted the job, rushed down to Tuskegee, all excited to get started, and he's looking around for a church and an old schoolhouse, somewhere where he could begin his lessons during the day, but there was nothing but dirt and farmland. Kind of like when I looked out my window this morning when it was light. I imagined what he must have thought of. But it didn't discourage him. There was no obstacle, no challenge that was too great for him to overcome, which was his philosophy and a message that he imparted on students. And so he started recruiting students. He started getting them excited about an education. And one of the first things that he taught them to do was to make bricks. And in this slideshow, you see the students laboring in the hot sun for their own education, building Tuskegee brick by brick by brick. And the legacy of Booker T. Washington, one of his legacies is the legacy of Tuskegee University, which has educated millions of formerly enslaved people and their families. Now, Booker understood that education at Tuskegee needed to start with the basics. Now, you all may remember or talk about the debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, but Washington believed that you couldn't start reaching for the higher aims in life until you could meet your basic needs in life. And at Tuskegee, sometimes education started with hygiene, teaching them how to brush their teeth, how to tie their shoes. But what he did most importantly was he taught them a trade, gave them a tool so that they could have a stake in the nation's growing economy. Because he understood, coming out of 400 years of oppression and enslavement, there were really two questions. You had people, abolitionists, that believed that slavery was morally wrong, but some of those same people didn't believe that black people were equal to white people. And so he knew that he wasn't going to get people just to change their racist ideology overnight. So what he did was he showed freed black people how they could change themselves, overcome obstacles, develop strength of character, and rise by their own efforts to honorable positions of respect, most importantly, self-esteem. So Washington was a leader who brought stability in a time of transition from enslavement to freedom. And it may be said that he's the person that bridged the gap between the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil Rights Movement. And so now I come into the picture, and I'm about 5 or 6 years old, and I start to look around, and I'm noticing that my ancestors' likenesses are on statues, on money, postage stamps. I'm seeing schools named for them, libraries, buildings. And I'm asking my classmates, your grandparents on statues? Nope, yours are. Shannon's are. Next need to ask you. But I'm starting to feel kind of this weight of expectation in living in the long, vast shadow of these two great and influential American heroes. And it's a weight that I'm starting to not really want to carry. And then I'm starting to hear about what happened to those that came before me. And my grandfather and my grandmother, I told you about the happy love story and how they came together. But there's also a tragic side to their story. My grandfather, the surgeon, the namesake of Frederick Douglass, always carried this weight of expectation. And people expected him to be an iconic leader like Frederick. Well, there's only one Frederick Douglass. And when my grandmother was 3 months pregnant with my mother, that weight became too much for him to carry, and he took his own life. And so my mother was born without a father. She was raised without a father. And then when I came along and I had this dual lineage, my parents, grandparents, great-grandmothers went in the complete opposite direction, and they weren't going to force anything on me. And so I really was decisively disengaged from my own lineage until divine providence called in my life. And that happened in 2005. I read a National Geographic magazine cover story entitled 21st Century Slaves. And it was an article about human trafficking existing in every country around the world, including right here in the United States. And that really just struck me like right between the eyes. And I'd heard about trafficking in some far-off places, but hadn't really thought about the impact that it had in my own backyard. And I wanted to learn more about the issue. And there was one evening that changed the course of my life and the trajectory of my life. And I was reading another article that was about a 12-year-old girl who was forced to be a sex slave in the brothels of Southeast Asia, and to do some really horrible things. And down the hallway, my two daughters were getting ready for bed. My older daughter was 12, so she was the same age as this young lady that I was reading about. And my younger daughter was 9. And my mind just starts racing. And I can't wrap my brain around what I'm reading and what I'm hearing. And I remember thinking to myself, that's what young girls and boys should be doing, is getting tucked safely into bed, not being forced into bed to do horrible things. And when I walked in to say goodnight to my daughters, I had this moment where I couldn't look them in the eyes. I couldn't look them in the eyes and walk away and not do something about this. And it was almost immediately that I understood that I had this platform that my ancestors had built through struggle and through sacrifice, and perhaps we could leverage the historical significance of my ancestry to do something about this issue. And I started thinking, well, wait a minute. We've got Frederick Douglass on one side, and his legacy is the great abolitionist, and on the other side, Booker T. Washington, and his legacy is the great educator. Aha! Abolition through education. How can we unfit communities to allow slavery to thrive and to exist? And it was through education. And so we started the organization Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives in 2007, my mother and I, and we were off and running, and we turned to schools, and we started talking about the history of slavery in this country, and the true history. And we found that students and teachers were really, it was resonating with them, and they were really anxious to learn more about it. And then we would transition into talking about human rights issues, and we had a program called History, Human Rights, and the Power of One. And we would talk about human trafficking and what that looks like, give them some preventative information that would help reduce the vulnerability of them being trafficked in their own neighborhoods. And as we would go to school and do that, the students started asking me, well, how can I be an abolitionist like Frederick Douglass or Sojourner Truth? How can I do this? How can I communicate the inhumanity of today's slavery to my school, to my community, to my church, to churches, to my civic organizations? And that's where the Power of One came in. Service learning, civic engagement. And so we developed service learning curricula that has been distributed all over the world, where teachers can come to our website and be able to download curricula for free, and they're off and running. And then they come back to us, the students and teachers, with these really creative service projects. We've had students that have presented at the UN. We've had students that have trained law enforcement on how to recognize human trafficking in the community, so law enforcement responds, not treating them as criminals, but as victims and survivors. We've had students that have done art exhibits. I mean, just really the sky's the limit, using their talent, their passion, their creativity, and their intellect to address those issues that they're most concerned about. That program has evolved into an online program called Protect, which we started in 2016. Protect now is in 10 states and counting. We're expanding internationally in 2023. And just so proud of that program because we've had more than 500,000 students that have been educated by more than 60,000 teachers that have been trained on how to recognize and look out for red flags of trafficking in the classroom. We also have a program called 1 Million Abolitionists. And I figured if there are going to be school districts that are going to ban books or not even have teaching of Frederick Douglass in the classroom, we started a project called 1 Million Abolitionists. We published a special bicentennial edition of his narrative, and we've been working to give away 1 million copies of that book to young people everywhere. To young people that gather outside of the hysteria of this reactionary movement to try and sanitize our history. We're about 100,000 copies of those books given away right now, so we have a long way to go to get to 1 million. But with the help of community members, with corporate donations and gifts and foundations and individual donations, we will get there. And so I'm really proud of that program. And I'm going to go ahead and close with this one idea that I just want to leave with you. So I've been talking about the importance of education, but I also want you to think about the importance of the history that lives in each of us. We all stand on the shoulders and walk in the shoes of those that came before us. And for those of us that have researched our family tree, I know that you found some great people that may have given up their lives just for the freedoms that we do have. May have given up their lives just so that some of us can sit in a room like this together of different races. History lives in each of us. I remember I had a young girl when we first started. I'll never forget this. She was 10 years old, and she was bouncing up and down in her chair in the classroom, raising her hand, waiting for me to call on her. Mr. Morris, Mr. Morris. She said, I researched my family tree, and I found that my four greats grandmother was born into slavery, taught herself to read and write in secret, ran away, and became a successful businesswoman and a philanthropist, and she knew exactly what that word meant, and she was proud to share it with me. And so she said, so Mr. Morris, do you know what all of this means? And before I had a chance to respond, she said, it means I have greatness flowing through my veins just like you do. We all have greatness flowing through our veins because we are the sons and daughters. We're the grandsons and granddaughters. Some of us are the products of slavery. This country is the product of slavery. This country is also the product of the abolition of slavery. And from Frederick Douglass, we learned that we have a right to be free. And from Booker T. Washington, we learned how to make our way in the world as free citizens. And from Martin Luther King Jr. and many other great leaders of the civil rights movement, we learned that as free citizens, we have the same rights as all citizens. When I was growing up, the challenges faced by great men like my ancestors were apparent to me because it just so happens their blood flows through my veins. But the fact is, all of us, we live far from the cotton fields. And we're worried more about our favorite sports team winning a ball game on Sunday than we are about the threat of being beaten by our overseers. We live in modern times, and the echoes of slavery are hard to hear from where we stand. But if we all listen close enough, we'll hear cries and not echoes from those that are enslaved today. And we'll hear cries and not echoes of all of the young people that need hope, need inspiration. They need to hear these stories. They need to know where they come from. They need to know that greatness flows through their veins as well. And when we listen close enough, that's when I believe change can happen. You've seen a photograph of Frederick's house in the Anacostia neighborhood in Washington, D.C. I was born in D.C., and I remember we used to go on field trips to that home, and I visited it all the time, and I loved that house. And there were two rooms that I really loved about that house. The first was his library on the first floor. And when you go into the library, and for those of you that have been to the home, it's the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. It's run by the National Park Service now. And in that library, there are thousands of volumes of books. And I remember being a little boy and thinking to myself, he never went to school, but that's where he got his knowledge. He read everything that he could get his hands on. And then if you go upstairs and down the hallway is his bedroom. And that was my favorite room. But you know how when you go into museums and they'll have that velvet rope that blocks off the rooms so that you can't sit on the furniture or touch anything? And so in that house, from the hallway into the room is one of those velvet ropes. And when I was a little boy, I always wanted to see what was in that room. They wouldn't let me go in there. So I would stick my neck over the rope to see inside that room. And if I looked to the left, I could see his bed. And on his bed is his nightshirt. And next to the bed, on a chair, is his hat. And on the floor is a pair of his shoes. And when I was little, I always wanted to sneak past that rope and try those shoes on. So when we started our organization in 2007, the first talk I ever gave was in the visitors center in that home. And I told that story that I just shared with you all. And when I finished my presentation, the site manager said, I've got a great idea. Let's go on a special VIP tour. And there were about 25 students and some teachers and some parents. And so we rushed up the hill. The house is on a hill called Cedar Hill. So it's up a big hill, and I'm running up the hill, and the kids are following behind me. And then to get in the house, I'm knocking the kids over because I want to get into the library first and show them all the books. And then follow me, follow me. So we rush up the stairs and down the hallway, and there's that rope that's been staring at me for 40-plus years. And the site manager did something they'd never done before. She took down the rope, and she said, come on in. So all of us rushed into the room, and it's not a very big room. And so we were all kind of shoulder to shoulder, just trying to feel our way around. And then there was a photographer, and the photographer said, let's take a picture. So he started placing people, and he said, you go here, you go here, you go here. And then he gets to me. And do you know where he put me? Did you say in the shoes? Like, look at that visual. Pick me up and put me in the shoes. Put me right next to the shoes. And so I'm like this, taking the picture, and I looked down and I said, there they are. After all of these years, all I would have to do is just slip off my shoes, and I could step right into them, and nobody would ever know. And I'd be sitting there saying to myself, look at me, taking picture in Frederick Douglass's shoes, finally. But I never did. I know. I never tried those shoes on because I knew that they wouldn't fit. Those shoes are too big for any of us to fit into. But what I realized at that moment was that I could take the shoes that I've got. You all could take the shoes that you've got, and we can lead the way to a brighter future. We can lead the way to a better tomorrow and lift up our young people and give them the examples of the great freedom fighters, Cesar Chavez, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner B. Truth. Pick your freedom fighter of choice. And in the same way that my ancestors began to affect change in the world around them, we could do the same thing. And with that, I thank you all very much for inviting me to be a part of your celebration. It's been my honor to be with you, and thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Woo! I don't know if I could follow that. But I tell you what, I definitely understand everything that he spoke on. One of the things that he said, something in regards to those to help with the freedom, those that helped many to get through the Underground Railroad. And believe it or not, you had to have other people to do that. And I'll say today is we have many here in Terrebonne Parish. If that time was so, people like Miss Margaret Hebert, you would definitely think that, hey, she's one of those people. People like Miss Ann Wazin, she's one of those people. So because they had a listening ear and they said, let us join us. let's join together and do what we need to do, get done. And so they are part of the Cajun group. But guess what? Because of them, it happened. So without further ado, we're going to go on with the monologue. Ingrid Green, are you here? Oh, okay. Oh, I had another bucket. Okay, you guys, here go Ingrid. You need music? No. All right, they're putting down some more chairs if anybody need a chair. And by the way, you guys, this is Layla. Miss Layla is a young girl that actually caught on to my skirt tail. And she's like, Miss Margie, I need to know everything I need to know about history. You have to teach me. So everywhere I go, Layla is with me. So this is Miss Layla. Hopefully we pass this stuff on. All right.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. We're going to see how this goes because I need to read off of this paper too. But anyways, I just said, if you missed what I said, too much is given, much is required. And we were just given a lot by Mr. Morris. I'm just blown away by everything that he's told us. I want to know more. I want to know more. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'm so very thankful and so grateful to be here. And I know that it's nothing but the Lord that brought me to meet Ms. Margie Scobie and Pastor Scobie and everyone here, because I've always felt like I've been a member here. I've always felt like I've been welcome here. It's the Spirit of the Lord that I feel in them and in this community that has brought me here. And so we have the Spirit here today. And I'm very, very thankful.
Can they still hear?
To share. Can y'all hear me now? Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Just try holding that little string. Can you hear it? Let me turn this on.
Okay, we'll see how this goes. All right. I am a local author and a poet from downriver in Luling, Louisiana. But I've shared a lot of my work because of what God has given to me. I didn't want to do any of this, but I wanted to write a story about my life to talk about how I was a single parent and how I raised my children. And I wanted to just write a book about that, just to inspire women and to just talk about the fact that we are worthy. I wanted other women to know what I'd gone through. And so I sat and I tried to write because I speak. I'm a motivational speaker. I've been doing it for over 30 years. And I just get up and I just tell the Lord, just give me what it is you want me to give to your people. And I'm always writing. And I couldn't write anything. And I said, Lord, what is the problem? I've never had writer's block. What is the problem? He said, you give me 7 books of poetry and I'll let you write all of the novels you want to. And now I'm on book 18. Didn't know how I was going to publish. Didn't know where the words were going to come from, but he's given it to me. And people have told me that I'm an old soul. So because I'm an old soul, I had a vision one morning. And I looked up. And whenever I have these visions or words come to me, I have to write this stuff down. That's how I have 18 books. And I had this vision of a lady, an older lady, a slave, looking up as she was scrubbing the floor. There was a glimmer of light, and she said, there be peace and what I knows. So this is a poem that I wrote in a book entitled As I Ponder. It is now a monologue because I become the characters that I write about. I become the old soul. So I'm asking you to go with me prayerfully and carefully as I attempt to read and reproduce for you today my monologue known as There Be's Peace and What I Knows. There be's peace and what I knows, child, from my head down to my toes. See, children don't know what I know like I do, because I done seen it all. I done seen so many things, I'm telling you. Been here over 150 years, that's what they say. Come on, that's birthday. I still living, singing, and going along as I pray to my God so he can be pleased with me. I want to hear him say, servant, well done. When at them pearly gates I be, want to know that I did right by him, you see. Want to know that I did right by him. Yeah, you know, that's how we supposed to do in this here life. Ain't supposed to act like no earthly show. I've been a cooking, a cleaning, and a scrubbing white folks' floors for years. Been minding their chillin' and my chillin' along with mine as I shed many tears. As I watch many of my family and friends be bought and sold away, just like them cows and them horses. No, we didn't come here to stay. No, we didn't come here to stay like they had us. No, not at all, you see. Because my God, he had a plan for us. He had a plan for folk that looked it just like you and like me. He loves us, child. Don't you know? And it's because of that love I've been able to keep going and to go. I had it hard, y'all. I done seen a lot. Yes, I have, it's true. As I scrubbed them floors and the hallways of the big house. Yes, I says, for me and for you. I says for me and for you, because that's all I knows how to do. Had to take care of us. That's all I knows how to do. I had no real schooling, had no nice clothes. Just had to make do with what I had, child. That's all I knows. But that was good enough for me. That's what the master says. Thought I should be thankful for my place way out yonder, past the big house, you know. They tells me we take care of you, keep you alive, keep you safe. Just do as we say so. You and yours will not get killed and not get sent away. No, I didn't want no trouble back then in the day. See, I had born 12 children on this here massive property. 6 by him, 6 by my man Jim, as good as he could be. I knows it wasn't right for him. Jim was a good man. It was hard for him to set them children. And this I knows. But if he didn't, if I didn't, where was we going to go? Now you tell me so. Jim was a good man, good worker in them fields, as we all could see. Massa kept him busy, so with me, he could do as he pleased. Jim says, I know she's a good woman, and you can't have it your way. I knows. You got to do what the master say. So me and Jim, we loved them 12 children. Yes, you see, 6 boys and 6 girls, you know. I watched them along with master's house, and I watched my children, and together they all would grow. Nurse mine on one side, nurse master on the other side. And that's what the way it was, you see. I did the cooking, the cleaning. I scrubbed them floors, y'all, and them hallways. That's where I'd be. while the master wife, the missus of the house, she got to have lots of fun. Having important people to the house, making me hand things here and there. See how people go here and there, and then she have me going run, trying to catch up with them and do what they say. I would be here and there. She used to laugh at me, spit at me. She didn't care. She knew some of my children was for massa. And she always let me know, because she treated me real bad. She laughed at me and made fun of me so. Sometimes I felt so low I couldn't take it no more. But I looked it up to heaven and to my God. I know he loved me so. I said, Lord, there be peace in what I knows. And what I knows it to be right. Please, Lord, let me bear this pain. Help me make it through the night. My God is a good God. He answers prayers, I'm telling you, because it would be dark and my work day would be through. I'd be so tired. I'd be tired, working my fingers to the bone, just rubbing the floors. But me and mine, we had a place to lay our head. So who could want for more? Knowing I had to do it, this was the only way that my kids, someday, some might, hopefully, some may, if I just could keep on going, Lord, there'd be a brighter day. I got to do it, Lord. This is all I know. Help me, please stay live long enough, Lord, to raise these children and to help them learn how to pray. To you, Lord, because that's all I knows how to do. Please, surely you won't let them go astray. So day in and day out, I worked hard, I'm telling you. It's simply amazing what a hard-working body could do. And as for my man Jim, well, Master up and sent him away. Jim got so mad at Master, he got up in his face one day. I begged Master not to kill him. So he turned and he looked at my face and he looked at my teary eyes. I'm glad he has seen the love I had for that man. And he looked at my eyes and saw the tears that I cried. He spared my Jim his life, but he says he must go. Now the love of my life would be leaving because my master says so. I had loved that man with all of my heart, and now it was time for us to part. Jim says, don't cry for me. Take care of our children and set them free. So I heard that voice so long like a song all through the night. Jim never got to his new place, never knowed where he'd be. Folks in them fields, there was a talking. And you know the talking, it got back to me. Said Jim never made it to his new place. No, he never made it at all. Said Jim was found left for dead somewhere a long way off, as I recall. Master never meant for him to live, and this I knows. He never treated him right, nor me right. So when he was gone, why would he do it now, so? I took this as a lesson well learned. On my hands and knees, I prayed to the Lord till my whole body burned. Dear Lord, let me live to raise these children, please. Let them obey you, trust you. This I ask of you on bended knees. My God saw me through many changes, from one master to another master house. You see? And that was good, as I know it. But I was able to keep my children together, and together we all would grow it. I started learning me some letters, and started writing some letters and some words too. God didn't forget about me and all my hard work. No, he didn't forget about me. He didn't forget about you. He didn't forget about all the hard work, all the cooking, and the cleaning. No, he didn't forget about me. And as for my children, they're doing mighty fine. See, I passed on now, but my children is up, living live and enjoying a lot of my God sunshine. Tell me I got me 2 doctors, 2 lawyers, 2 school teachers too. 1 judge, 2 policemen, 3 carpenters. Honey, I thought you knew. My children, seed of my seed, have done just mighty fine. It's true. Things always work out when you trust the Lord, like I'm telling you. There be peace in what I knows. And what I knows, I told you from the beginning. There be peace in what I knows, because when you believe in God, that's how I be winning. There be peace in what I knows. And what I knows is right. There be peace in what I knows, because I pray to my Lord every day and every night. There be peace in what I knows, because gone are the days of me scrubbing floors and hallways. There'll be peace in what I knows, because I taught my children well. There'll be peace in what I knows, because my children are alive. They're educated, and now they can ring their own ding, 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 freedom bell. There'll be peace in what I knows, because I believe in my God, and he's ever only thing I know. There'll be peace in what I know as I prayed to you, believed in you, and mine, as we both would grow. There'll be peace in what I knows, because I'm dead now, and I'm going up above with you. There'll be peace in what I knows. Live right, do right, treat others right, and that same peace you in your life can someday find too. Thank you. Take this on me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is St. Luke, St. Lucie. I know y'all don't need. I know y'all don't need.
Hello, is that better? Oh, that's much better. Okay, very good. I like that nickname. I'm a martial artist, so fall the denial. Satan will be denied. So anyway, here to speak to you tonight a little bit about the kind of the cultural history of at least the Catholic religion here in Terrebonne Parish, which has deep roots in all across Acadiana, especially because the Cajun people come from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, all from the Grand Dérangement, the Great Expulsion from Canada. Also from a second source, as well as our state belonged to France at one point. Then it belonged to Spain during the period of the American Revolution, and then going back to France before being bought finally by the United States. So between those two sources, the Catholic faith has a very deep tradition down here. And there's so many ways we see that between just the symbolism, the culture, prayers, things of that nature. You look at the New Orleans Saints, for crying out loud, right? This is one thing I think that it really just kind of comes through. The fleur-de-lis is symbolic of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And when the Saints were founded, I don't know if you knew this, the Saints as a team were founded on November 1st, which, All Saints Day, right? And so at the time, the owner asked the Archbishop of New Orleans, I think it at that time was Archbishop Hannon. They asked Archbishop Hannon for permission to name the team the Saints, and he gave his permission, but he warned them. He said, let us remember, though, that the very first saints, most of them were martyrs. So I know the the early years of the saints were perhaps the paper bag wearing days, but at least in our area, the Catholic faith has taken great hold, and especially another huge tradition of ours is Mardi Gras. Who doesn't love Mardi Gras around here? Mardi Gras especially, we look at what it symbolizes. It's called Fat Tuesday for a reason, because before the invention of the refrigerator, when you would fast for Ash Wednesday, you would fast and you would abstain from eating meat all the way through Lent until Easter. So it's not as it was now where you can still eat meat on other days except Fridays. You fasted from meat all the way through Easter. And so everybody had to clear their refrigerators of meat. So guess what you did on the day before Easter, or Ash Wednesday? You ate it all. So that's why we'll call it Fat Tuesday. And so it's such a festive day in countries like France, Spain, or anywhere the Catholic faith spread to, such as Brazil, who has such a huge Portuguese influence, still continue these carnival celebrations for that particular reason. It was the day that they would celebrate, they would eat all of their meat, and it was the last day of celebration until the celebration of the resurrection for Easter. And so we still see that. Now, I'm not going to get into this is maybe opening a can of worms, the debate of crawfish balls on Good Friday. I'm not going to go into that. I'm sure there are many opinions on that topic, but I'm not going to go into that. But in many ways, what we see is at least the French heritage somewhat dying in what we're trying to do, especially in the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux, of which Terrebonne Parish is a part of, is resurrecting some of those Cajun influences with even our liturgies. On August 15th, a celebration of the Assumption, every single year now we call it the French Mass for people of Acadian heritage, where we celebrate the Mass in French, and that's something I've been able to do for the last couple of years. Now, how much French do I actually speak? I'll say it this way, enough to read the Missal. I'm not fluent, but one thing I've been very thankful to see, though, is that there's been great efforts to revive the French language, which helped to bring our faith to this area as well. But with that, we've also begun in the last couple of years, COVID kind of threw it off, as well as the hurricane last year, a Eucharistic procession up Bayou Lafourche, which we've seen start in Golden Meadow. It's had its different transition periods. It would start in Golden Meadow by boat. It would get to La Rose, and then we would go by fire truck, and then we'd go by foot through St. Joseph's Cemetery to the Co-Cathedral in Thibodaux. And so we're seeing these things. We're trying to appreciate our French heritage, especially, which a lot of our ancestors brought the faith down with them. And so it's a very vibrant faith. It's intertwined, especially with our French culture. And so with that, it's amazing to see the ways that we celebrate it. And I love that we have the St. Luke's Choir here. I remember when Bishop Fobb first got here and for his installation, and y'all rocked the house. And I went to his installation mass up in Kentucky, and you can tell he misses you all, because we got up there, and for his installation mass, they had their choir sing a gospel piece as well. And you see some heads from Kentucky turning around like, what is going on? And all of us from Houma-Thibodaux are like, this is his final kind of hoorah from leaving our diocese. So thank you so much for being here. And again, the Catholic faith is something that it's a part of many people's lives. and especially with the other faith traditions, what I'm so thankful for down here is the sense of ecumenism that we have with other denominations. And I know there's many associations. In fact, actually, I trained Taekwondo in Thibodeau, and one of the parents is a pastor in Raceland. And he said, Father, we'd love to get you to come to our meetings sometimes. We have a bunch of pastors from the Central Lafourche area. And I said, man, that's awesome. And I love seeing that. When I was assigned in Galliano, there was another organization, same thing. The pastors of all the local churches would get together for breakfast and just meet and have community and prayer together. And so I'm very thankful, and that's what we're doing tonight as well, is we'll also have, I think, 2 other speakers speaking about their faith traditions. But again, it's just something that, again, you see it in our culture in Mardi Gras, the Saints football, something that we just give thanks for all the time, which help keep our in a sense, our culture together has been our faith, and I think that's one of the great traditions that we have here in Terrebonne Parish. And so with that, I think we have another speaker on the other churches. Who's next after me? Margie, is Margie here? Okay.
I am also your first cousin, third removed.
Great, fantastic.
Okay, I'll also be talking about the Catholic Church because that is my religion, has been since I was born. And St. Francis de Sales Cathedral was just St. Francis de Sales Church when I was born. But that church I was baptized in, I made my first communion there, I made my confirmation there, graduated from 8th grade there, graduated from high school, and I got married there. So when I walk into St. Francis, it's like going home. You know, I've been to other parishes. After we were married, you move, you're in another parish. But the Catholic religion is just a part, and it stays a part. It does not, and I assume if you are a Methodist, if you are a Baptist, whatever religion you are, it is a part of you. And that's my ancestry is from Pontchartrain, and it was Dupre's who came here, Jean Dupre, came here in the 1600s. And so my ancestors go back, way, way back. In fact, I don't know if Reggie Dupre is still here, but he's my nephew. So I have been around a good long time. In fact, there's up at the top, that's St. Francis. That was the original school. That was the convent for the Marianites of the Holy Cross. And you had outbuildings that went around a quadrangle. And that's where I started school. My father was a trapper, which meant that we were taken out of school from December, January, and February. Well, when I came back in February, the new St. Francis School, which is the St. Francis School that still is there, I went my second half of my first grade year. So I was only at that school 3 months. And then the other one was born. And it's the same school that's still standing right now. And I'm 77 years old, and I was in first grade when I went there. So that's how long and how old that school is. But my wedding, Margie asked me to bring my wedding book, and it's there if anybody wants to look. We did not have a bride and groom on the top of our wedding cake. We had that chalice that you see right there. It's my sister who gave it to us for a wedding present, and it has our names on it and the date. And every year that we celebrated our anniversary, and we were married for 44 and a half years before he passed away, we drank out of that chalice. In fact, on our wedding day, we toasted out of the chalice. And then every anniversary, we toasted out of that chalice. And we did that for 44 years. And he was a good man, very good man. I miss him extremely. But I brought rosaries. There's 2 rosaries there. There's I don't know if y'all know what a sick call outfit is. Okay, this is a sick call, and you take it out. It has candles inside, and you would put holy water in there. And there's little notches where you would set them in. And if the priest was coming over for some religious thing at your house, mostly it was when they came over to pronounce someone dead and give them the last rites. And you put the candles in, you lit the candles in, and that was, because this is blessed. This also was given to me for my wedding. So this thing is 58 years old. And I brought my book, which is, it says, they came, they stayed. And that was on the Dupre family. So that is my line in that little blue book right there. I have pictures of my grandparents in there, my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother came from Italy, and she was a Vito. And she spoke no English when she came here. She spoke Italian. And my great-grandfather spoke only French, because they were down the bay on their own, in their own little community, and very seldom was English spoken. And they ended up with 15 children. So they found a language of their own. You know, it's a universal language, believe you me. And so I am descended from that line. So yeah, it's a hodgepodge, but the United States is a hodgepodge. We are a hodgepodge, and we need to learn to live together and to love each other and to love God, especially love God. And I'll turn it over to whoever is speaking for another religion. Is there someone else speaking?
Thank you. Thank you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Story goes that there were some people waiting, and they were debating. They saw someone from afar off. And one man said to him, he said, "That looked like Jesus." The other guy said, "That's not Jesus. He looks all smoky." The other guy says, "It looks like Jesus." The guy says, "That's not Jesus. He's old raggedy." Another guy said, "But it looks like Jesus." He said, "That's not Jesus. He's all bloody." And as he came and he came and he came, and he looked at him and said, "Yes, that's Jesus. But why are you so raggedy? Why are you so bloody?" And he said, "You know, have you heard of the 3 Hebrew boys who went down in the fiery furnace? And they come up, and that's why I'm all smoky. But have you heard of my servant Daniel, who wrestled and wrestled and wrestled? They say he wrestled and wrestled. It was I that wrestled with that lion. But have you heard of a place called Calvary?" See, we believe that in the Baptist faith that we wouldn't have a religion that we couldn't feel sometime. But no, we look at also that we are hearers, doers, and readers of the Bible. And I'm reminded that we look at the fact that as we go through a particular history, and then covering a segment of Terrebonne Parish and its celebration, Paul wrote to Timothy And he said that, in my research, that was a concern, that he had some concerns about the church. I have concerns about the church today, that hypocrisy has infiltrated. Regardless of what religion you have, hypocrisy has infiltrated. But I'm not here, I'm a substitute, but then like I say, I serve a true and a living God, and He lives within me. You see, that some of this that you read about, and we see, and Brother Morris, as he spoke greatly in reference to the history, I read in the book of Revelation that the testimony of a Christian, a true believer, the testimony. See, that was a big fight. And about the seed of the woman, that was what she was carrying. That seed. People that comes about the earth, the seed. That seed carried the laws of God. And this is where the joy should come in at. And the testimony of Jesus Christ. You ask the question, oftentimes, you say, well, who are you? I'm one that would be found but could not be counted. I'm one of those that comes out of hard trials and tribulations. Because it's within my belief. My grandfather, my mother's there, my grandfather, my grandfather couldn't read. But I promise you here, I'll quote some scripture to anybody in here. But say, in my Father's house there are many mansions. He goes on and tells of the story that when Jesus said that where I am, there you may be also. So we're dealing with the hypocrites. We're dealing with the unadulterated Word of God. And you want to talk about religion, we talk about true religion. And say, well, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is your Lord, then you are saved. And the articles of faith that we actually follow, that says there's no way for a sinner, the greatest sinner upon this earth, to lose his religion. The only way you really can lose it is blasphemy. Now, because you have an opportunity of repentance. But also, no man coming to the Father but by me. I am the way, truth, and the life. So with that belief and a constant studying of the Word and divine intervention within our hearts that spew out our mouths, sometimes we are anointed just by in the womb before we come out. Everyone here today, we believe that it's a predestined opportunity that you have. But when we say all men are created equal, it is the moral values that you read the book of Philemon when he was instructed to go back to the slave owner. But it is our belief. As she washed the floors, but her children raised. We shall overcome is not just a song. There are a number of denominations within the United States. And I'm happy to say I'm Baptist. Who couldn't have figured that? For me to be the substitute, I am also a member of the St. Luke Baptist Church of Waterproof, Louisiana. Over there, there's a picture of Reverend Clarence Fleming. Baptized me in Bayou Black. And just to get you to understand what being a Southern Baptist is, we look at the fruits of the Spirit. And we look at Webster, and I see Mr. Ross is there. Webster's definition of meekness is saying that you're weak. But as for a Christian, we show strength in being meek. I disagree with Webster. I'm sorry. I know he's dead and gone, but, man, you're just coming with that, with having divine intervention then. But it is long-suffering, having love. I'm going to leave with my favorite scripture because it gives an explanation of why Jesus came. In the book of Luke, the 4th chapter, and the 18th verse, he came for the downtrodden, those bruised, those are misfortune, the widows, and the orphan. And I don't care what religion you represent, you feel, and I also present God or eternal life to you by you confessing in your mouth and believing in your heart. But Jesus states his purpose. And he didn't state his purpose by care and compassion different from this lady, that lady. We all, as citizens of this earth, should have care and compassion for everyone. At the end of the day, you come to the Baptist church, you're going to have a mighty good time. You even go to St. Lucie, you're going to have a mighty good time. So we want to enjoy ourselves, show much love, much love, much love. And I appreciate God for lending me an opportunity just to express and stand before you to say, yes, I believe in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
All right. And y'all, without further ado, we are here to introduce Mr. Kwanzaa. He's going to give you a taste of his flavor, his music, which is the Cajun music. And then after, we're going to do a break, an intermission. Okay? Okay. Ms. Margaret's going to come and tell you guys about the chapter of the Cajun group. Thank you.
If you notice the backs of our shirts, we're the Bayou Cajuns chapter of the Cajun French Music Association. Kervin is going to demonstrate a few of our instruments. We meet once a month right here. The first Wednesday of every month, we have a meeting. We start eating first. Everybody brings a dish, and we eat at 5:30. Then the band, our meeting comes on at 6 o'clock, and then the band's afterwards, and the band plays until 8:30, because we got to be out of here for 9. So in this room, if anybody wants to come and join us and see what we like, that's the first Wednesday of every month at 5 o'clock over here. Okay? And like I said, I'm a Dupré from way back, because that's French. That's French country. I came from French people. My daddy did not speak English until the children were born. When he and Mama got married, he spoke only French. And I'm the second to last of 8 children. So by the time I came along, he was speaking English. So only my 2 older sisters are the ones who were fluent in French. But him and Mama talked to each other in French. And we listened. Believe you me, we listened. And the first words I heard were curse words in French. I'm sorry. My daddy, bless his heart, spoke English by that time, but buddy, if he was cursing, it was in French. And did we get punished for that too, because we weren't supposed to be saying those words. But I've always loved the French language. I went to school in high school, and I took French for the 2 years, and I learned to read French, okay? I didn't always understand it, but I read it. And as I'd hear people talk the French, and I'd read the French. I said, aha, you know. So I married my husband, bless his heart, and he could understand French, and he spoke it because his grandparents spoke no English. So he learned to speak to his grandparents in French. So needless to say, he could speak it fluently, I could read it, and I could write it. So we got along well. But anyway, Kervin is going to demonstrate the instruments for you.
Before we start, I'm also an ancestor of French royalty, I guess. My family used to own Last Island. You know, if y'all know the Wazans, well, I'm one of the Wazans. We don't own it anymore. The government owns it. Okay, another thing. For you, since Father Daniel mentioned the saints, I'd like to bring this up. Y'all don't know it, but I'm gonna accept I'll accept your apologies for cussing at me at the Saints game. Y'all remember back when they wouldn't replay the bad calls by the umpires? I was the one that was cutting it. Yeah, I worked 43 years for the Saints in the press box. Okay. It's in there. No. I gotta do it. I'm not gonna do it that far. Okay, first of all, him and his wife wrote the song, and he's the one that sang the song. His two sons, one played the accordion and the other one played the violin in that music you just heard there. Okay. Oh yeah, they won a award for that. Okay, the idea behind the washboard, back in the early 1900s. They didn't have snare drums, a drum set. They used their mama's washboard. See the other type with the wood? Some had cymbals on the top, a wood block, and some I seen with a horn on it. Well, anyhow, that's a real washboard. Now, this one here actually is a Zydeco washboard. It's a Zydeco. Okay. And like I said, they use it in place of a drum. It is a instrumental instrument, a musical instrument. Also, like the triangle. The real name of a triangle is a ID-do phone. Something like that. IDO phone. Audio. That's it. Audio phones. That's audio phone. This really was invented back in the 14th century. The Egyptians used to use it in their church. That's when it started. And later on, then some of the bands took over it. And so that's basically all I have.
All right. Okay, you guys. We're going to take a little intermission so you guys can get up, scratch your legs, and also get something to eat. Because Big Mike Barbecue has provided us with the meal for tonight. So don't get full and leave, you guys, because we still have a treat for you. So please get up, get a little, scratch your legs, and get something to eat. Thank you. I'm sorry, you guys. If you get up, you can go in the back. They're serving it in that conference room next door. It's in the conference room next door. Hello, can I get your attention, please? We're getting ready to start over again. Next on the program is Susan Kinney. She's here. She's going to explain about the culture of our food.
Good evening, and welcome to a segment of Terrebonne 200, featuring some of the foods that the enslaved, can you hear me? Okay, featuring, right here, you good? Okay. I'm gonna be talking about, just briefly, featuring some of the foods that the enslaved Africans brought to America, one being our favorite this time of the year, okra. You know, we gotta have it for that gumbo. Hoppin' Johns is what they call them in the Carolinas. But we call them what? Black-eyed peas. Okay? Butternut squash and zucchini squash. And the Carolina gold rice. Actually, the rice in general. I travel the low country a lot, so I eat a lot of the Carolina gold rice. And if you ever get a chance to taste it, trust me, it is very good. In the Carolinas, they eat like us. They eat rice with everything. When I first went to Charleston, I was like, well, why are they having every meal? No matter how, even if it's hot dogs, every meal, rice. Yes, exactly. And then they have something called millet. You said, what is millet? I asked myself the same question. It's a grain. Beer is made out of it, bread. People use it as a binder for vegetarian dishes. And they use it for a base for casserole or grain salad. Now, millet kind of looks like corn a little bit, but it's ground up really, really fine. Okay? Corn was also one of the foods that the enslaved African Americans brought to the States. Peas, like I said, black-eyed peas, yams, and sweet potatoes. Now that you know that there is a difference between yams and sweet potatoes? Okay. And they bought us watermelon. Now, I'm from the South, I'm from here, I'm from Gibson, but I don't like red meat watermelon anymore. I love the yellow meat. It has a different flavor, it's sweeter, and I lived in Georgia most of my adult life, so I got a chance to try yellow meat watermelon from a place called Cordele, Georgia. If you ever get a chance to go or ever get a chance to taste some yellow meat watermelon, it's very good. Now, another thing I want to tell you about millet. Millet, that's my brother. I'm going to hurt him. Oh.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. This young lady's up here talking and y'all making all this noise. When the first two people was up here talking, y'all didn't make all that noise. So y'all gotta give her the same respect y'all gave him.
Oh, my brother don't play when it comes to me, y'all. Okay? I'm a little tired today. Let me tell you my story right quick. I am a 2-time kidney transplant patient. So I went today for my treatment. And here's my great news. They've taken me off 3 medicines. I don't have to get my blood drawn as often. I only get it drawn twice a month. And thing number 3, you right, thank you, Jesus. Like I said, this is my 2nd kidney transplant. My first one was in 2003. That one lasted 12 years and 3 months because I took care of me. And the other one I had was June the 24th of this year. So look at me, I'm a living testimony. And thing number 3 they told me is that I have to lose some what? Weight, but you know, the rice. All right, so let's get back to the millet. Millet is also a grain that helps you with diabetes. It helps you to lose weight. It also helps you with, if you're like me and you have coronary issues, millet helps you with your coronary issues. It is a good source of antioxidants. And it helps in slowing down muscle degeneration. Now, I made some copies, not too many, of some recipes of the foods that they brought here. If you'd like a copy, just come find me, give me your email, and I'll send it off to you tonight. Okay? You all have a great evening, and thank you so much for listening. I don't know who's next after me. Margie, who's next? Oh, Kezia. Hey! How are you?
Do I have photos or wait, where's Miss Margie?
She's right there.
Is there a photo? Okay. Oh, cool. Is there any more? Okay. Go back. Oh, okay. No, I don't think my stuff is up. That's okay. We'll just. What is this about? Gumbo. Okay. Do we have? No, that wasn't mine. That's okay. I can talk about Asian American culture and history in Terrebonne Parish, and just my personal culture a little bit. I'm a relatively new person, only been in Homa for like a year and a half, but in that year we all went through Hurricane Ida, so I suppose we we did the difficult stuff, not the fun stuff. Yeah, anyway, so cool thing about Chinese immigrants in Terrebonne Parish is that they really revolutionized the shrimping industry here. The sun drying techniques and the canning techniques that were brought over by Chinese immigrants really what commercialized shrimp, which then from the bayous here were then sent to the San Francisco port, which were then transferred back to Asia. There's also Chinese immigrants that contributed to labor after the Civil War on plantations and sugarcane plantations because black folks who were enslaved were emancipated, so plantations owners were looking for other forms of labor, and that played into that role. And then because of imperialism and war within Southeast Asia, that's why there's a big, robust Vietnamese American community here. And also in Jean Lafitte is the oldest Asian settlement in the United States, dating back to 1763. Talking with folks, they say that they have about 8 generations going back continuously from the Philippines who still live in Jean Lafitte. So I just think that these, I guess, hidden histories or just hidden populations are just really interesting to think about. I think oftentimes moving here for first the Homa Today job and then moving to the radio, it can be a really isolating experience, not having folks that look like you. So I guess going through this exercise and becoming rooted in people who share my cultural heritage and how they've made their space here was really comforting. For me personally, I'm Chinese Indonesian. So my family is from South Fujian, which is south of China, and then we migrated to Jakarta, and we've been there for 8 generations. And I think that has really informed how we look at food and culture, and we celebrate like the Lunar New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival, hoping for good harvest and that type of thing. And then I guess I'll walk out. But yeah, like my skirt that I'm wearing today is from my grandma who is still in Indonesia. So it's nice having her with me. Yeah. 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 If anyone has any questions. I have some business cards. If you'd want to just talk a little more about history and culture and that type of thing. Sorry that we all had to imagine in our heads what these things look like. I'm not looking at the screen. Yeah, and there's a little exhibit outside as well. Okay, thank you.
All right, next we have is holiday. Miss Christina, screens, please. And then we'll introduce the guest speaker. And before the guest speaker come up, we're gonna do a little music by Mr. Lionel Ruffin and by Mr. Nick Ward and his crew.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, not say I'm sorry, but anytime I begin to speak to a group of people, I have to say, God is good. And all the time. Amen. Because just to see everybody here, and everyone looks like they're having a good time. So, we woke up this morning. Okay. And I'm so excited we have some young folk here also. Because as one of the speakers said, we want to pass on our education, what we've seen, what we've heard, to our younger people. Because many times they do not get it. And for us as African American folk, we have got to tell our story. You hear what I'm saying? We have got to tell our story. Whether it's a sad story or whatever, because Patricia, we have sustained so much, and we learned from our errors and our ancestors' errors. And if you don't know your history, what's going to happen? You will repeat it. And that's not just for us as African American folk, but for everybody. So we've got to tell our stories to our children, okay? I know Margie and them gave me the task of talking about holidays. And for us, especially here in the United States, and for us here in the south of Louisiana, we have a lot of holidays. And we know how to celebrate. But what I'm going to start with, first of all, is in January, what for us for African Americans, we celebrate whose birthday? Martin Luther King. Okay? And then we skip into February, and that's Black History Month, the shortest month in the year. But Black History is every day. This is my granddaughter. Layla. Every day is Black History. And Black History is not just for us, it's American history, and it's also world history. Okay? Then we go to February. Then in March, what happens in March? Women's Day. Women's History. Yeah. But for us as people of African descent, we celebrate Bloody Sunday. You know what day that is? Bloody Sunday. It's a Sunday. Yeah, she's going, it's a Sunday. March 7th, that's the day that the Edmund Street Bridge was crossed. Okay? Yeah, they tried 2 or 3 times, correct. Mm-hmm. And then we also go into, so that's March, and then in April, who got killed? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., April 4th, that was my oldest son's birthday. He was made 3 years old that day. Mm-hmm. Then we go from April to May. From May to June, what happens in June? And what happened on Juneteenth? We did what? How many years later? 2 years. Okay? From June to July. Then in August, what happened? Think about it. August 28th. The March on Washington. Yeah. March 28th. August 28th. August, September, October, November, and December, what happens? What is it? Kwanzaa. And when is Kwanzaa? December the 26th until January 1st. How many of you know the principles of Kwanzaa? Umoja kujichagulia, ujima ujama kuomba nia imani faith. We used to teach that to our kids. We taught them that first of all, they were a child of God with a brilliant mind, and they used it all the time. And who they were and whose they were. That is exactly right. Now, what I have over here, I have made, I don't know if I have enough for everybody, but is Celebrate Black History. I want the young people to get it first. You out. It's a Black History calendar, okay? So we want Layla to go over there and make sure all of the children get one of those, and then what happens after? Give it to the seasoned people, yes. She hears me say that so often. You're not seasoned, but anyway. But just where are the children? Please, the kids, please. We still have children here? Put your hand up. Teenagers, okay. Because we want them to take that home and to bring it to school or do whatever. If not, the adults will get it, the seasoned people. Okay? But because we're dealing with the time and everything right now, that's all I have to say to you guys. Please remember what you've seen and what you've heard and pass it on. Please tell the children. Okay? Thank you, guys.
Without further ado, we're going to ask Mr. Nick and his crew to come up and give us a song. Mr. Nick, what's the name of your group? God Creation Mass Choir. Can you guys come up, please?
It makes no difference what you're going through. You're gonna make it. God's gonna see you through. Hold your head up. Put a smile on your face. For this is another test. It won't last always. So get ready for your blessing. Get ready. For your blessing. Get ready for your miracle. I know you've been hurting deep down inside. So let me encourage you that it's gonna be alright. Troubles and trials come to make you strong. Keep on believing and you keep holding on. Get ready for your blessing. Get ready for your miracle. Get ready for your blessing. Get ready for your miracle. God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing. Oh, God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing. Oh, God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing with your name on it. God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing. God's got a blessing with your name on it. 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 With my 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 name on it. Yeah, 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 yeah. With your name on it. 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 With your name on it.
How many of you know that it was nothing but the grace of God that have us here today? How many of you believe that if it wasn't for God's grace, that we would not be in this building today? How did I make it all these years? How did I make it this far? Through the valleys and over the hills. I know it had to be God. How did I make it through the storms? How did I make it through the rain? If you want to know just how I got here, It's so easy to explain. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. His amazing grace. I've made it this far. Yes, I made it. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. His amazing grace. I've made it this far. Yes, I made it by the grace of God. Lord, I thank you for how you brought me, how you brought me through the night. Lord, you kept me and you never left me. You stood by my side. There were so many times that I came so close. Old man death, he tried to take me in, but the reason I'm here is not hard for you to see. In fact, it's so easy for me to explain. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. It was God's grace. Grace of God. No, know just how I got here. Anybody wanna know why I'm still standing? Look at me. Look at me. I made it by the grace of God. Some people said, they said I wouldn't make it. Some people said I wouldn't be here today. But look at me. Look at me. I made it by the grace of God. God's grace.
All right. Next, Mr. Lionel Ruffin is going to render a solo before the guest speaker. So, Mr. Lionel Ruffin. I don't know if you guys got a chance to. Hallelujah. Now, I don't know if I can go behind that. Can you guys, we are here now to introduce the guest speaker. We have the twins, Cherry and Sherry. They're here to introduce this wonderful man that tie into Mr. Jefferson. So thank you, guys.
A veteran television host and social media influencer on TikTok and Instagram with well over 500 followers. His Instagram is @Mr. has been keeping audience entertained and tuned in his entire life. Shannon is currently a television news anchor with the nationally syndicated Chester News. He also recently co-anchored the CW39 morning show in Houston, Texas. This energetic father of three continued to host this critically acclaimed podcast, Daddy Duty 365, which features celebrity dads revealing the good, the bad, and the funny of fatherhood. Previously, Shannon hosted Arise Entertainment 360, a daily culture and entertainment series that previously aired on BET's sister network, Cedric, on a cable provider globally. Shannon is also known for his work as a commentator and a senior producer at Black Enterprise Magazine, a nationally syndicated shows, Black Enterprise Business Report, and Our World with Black Enterprise. As a teenager in Cincinnati, Shannon got his first television job on The Real Exchange, an Emmy Award-winning talk show focusing on issues important to young people. After graduating from Kent State University, he made his New York City debut as a syndicated producer for the CBS 2 morning news show. But he didn't waste any time getting in front of the camera. His next job saw him take on multimedia journalism, one-man band role as a writer, director, producer, editor, videographer, and reporter at the News 12 network. Soon thereafter, he took a seemingly comprehensive role at Fiscal One News, where he recently returned to anchor their weekend morning show. Shannon is also a writer, having co-authored the Raymond House Incorporated book, Jefferson's Children, The Story of One American Family, along with photojournalist Jane Fonman. The book follows his journey to uncover the history, the heritage as a ninth-generation direct descendant of President Thomas Jefferson and his slave Samuel Hemingson. Additionally, Shannon has inspired audiences across the globe with captivating speaking engagements that touch on everything from his presidential lineage to genealogy, family research, to racial equality, and his career in media. At the end of the Obama administration, Shannon participated in the White House My Brother's Keeper initiative and the National Entrepreneurship. I know my vocabulary words. Tour, bringing his signature brand of motivational humor to packed audiences live around the country. He's now hosting a nationwide small business challenge for the UPS Store Incorporated magazine. Gifted with undeniable charisma. I met him, he does have charisma. And energy that electrifies the stage, Shannon truly comes alive within the spotlight.
Like us.
He really does. Whether he's hosting a TV show, speaking to a packed auditorium, or emceeing a live event, this one Renaissance man who can't help but draw a crowd. A former executive at CBS said it best. Once Shannon's on, the audience is glued, so let's be prepared. He's born to be a star. Despite his full schedule, Shannon remains an active member of his church. Okay, we got an Alpha Phi Alpha man. And he's a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. He currently lives between Florida and New York. Oh, he married. Mm-hmm. With his wife, who happens to be his college sweetheart, Chandra. And their three little Laniers, Mason, Madison, and Carter. Okay, he like Jay-Z and B's. I'm sorry, correct me, get me right.
Make sure we say the children name correct.
Okay. Teach the babies.
They shall lead the world.
Follow Shannon's life on and off the camera on all social media platforms at Mr. Shannon Lanier. So please give us a warm welcome to Terrebonne Parish, Mr. Shannon Lanier.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator to certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But did you know when Thomas Jefferson wrote those famous words in the Declaration of Independence, it did not include people of color. It did not include women. It only included land-owning white men. One abolitionist once said that never before have someone been given such credit and fame for something they did not do. Because yes, he was not an abolitionist. Yes, he was the president, but he was also a slave owner. And I believe that as his grandson, we have to hold the man responsible for all the things that he was, not just the good things. It's all about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there was some ugly. And isn't it ironic that now his ninth generation grandson, who was a black man, will be now standing in front of you calling him a hypocrite. So again, as you heard, my name is Shannon Lanier. Thank you guys for sticking around to listen to me. I don't know whose bio they were reading. I was like, who did that stuff? I was like, okay, now they're going to expect me to get up here and do something. But I just appreciate you guys being here, and it's an honor for me to be able to take part in this amazing event that you guys are holding. And 200 years is definitely a great celebration. So thank you, Marjorie, for getting me here, and for everyone who participated in this amazing event. And wasn't the food good, y'all? Amen. I was like, I need a nap right about now. I don't know about y'all. Like, I've been up since 4:30 this morning. I had to anchor the news this morning on Cheddar News. Get on a plane, come here. So hang with me. I'll only be in front of you for a few minutes. I did want to tell you a little bit about my story and my family. So a lot of people always say, well, when did you know that you were a descendant of Thomas Jefferson? It's really my entire life. My mother and my family has always passed down my heritage to me through the oral history of the family, and my brother Sean and I, it just seems like we've always known it. But I remember once when we were studying the presidents in second grade in Virginia. No, it was in Georgia. It was in Georgia. We were studying the presidents, and I said, well, this gives me a good opportunity to tell the class who I'm related to. So I stood up in Georgia some 30-something years ago and said, well, Thomas Jefferson is my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And the teacher said, sit down and stop telling lies. You know it. She said, sit down. She's saying it today. Yeah, they told me to sit down and stop telling lies. The whole class laughed at me. I was mortified. But you know what? I have a wonderful mother, because she came to school the next day and said, do not tell my son he is lying. He is a descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. And one of the things that she taught my brother Sean and I is to be strong in the belief of who we are. Do not let anyone else dictate our lives and what we represent, because if you start to let them define you, they will continue to define you for the rest of your life. So I still praise my mother for instilling that in my brother and I and holding true to that throughout our lives. And it's just amazing to see how far this story has gone, because a lot of people, I'll give you some background in case you're not familiar with Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings' story. Well, once Thomas Jefferson's wife passed away, because a lot of people think it was an affair, but it wasn't. His wife had already passed away. 6 years later, he went over to Paris and he sent for his daughters. Sally Hemings was one of the ones who was watching over his daughters. Then she went over to Paris to help them in 1789. She was only about 14 at the time. Jefferson was like 45 at the time. And I know a lot of people say, you know, well, that's pedophile. Well, that didn't exist then. Women were dying younger, so they started families younger. People were, you know, more mature at a younger age because you had no choice to be. So it's hard to really judge history in contemporary eyes the way we see things now. We have to look at in the era that they were actually doing things at that time. But yeah, he was old and she was young. The truth still is there. And it's there that we believe that they began their 38-year-long encounter. Now, some people will say it was a relationship. I say she was a slave, he was a slave owner. It was an encounter. Now, I was not there. I don't know what their relationship was like, but I know someone who owns someone doesn't really give the other person an opportunity to say, hey, is this okay? Do you mind? Hey, I wasn't there. I don't know. But in my mind, the slaves did not have rights. They did not have the opportunity to say no, even if they wanted to. So that's just what I believe. But when Jefferson was returning back to the U.S., he told Sally Hemings he wanted her to come too. Well, Sally Hemings' brother, James Hemings, was also in Paris. He was Jefferson's chef, and he was getting trained as a master chef in all the arts. Anybody ever wonder where we get macaroni and cheese from? James Hemings. Some of you all saw it on the Netflix documentary recently. There's another documentary coming out about his life on November 4th, Amazon Prime. Write it down, Amazon Prime. I'm executive producing that documentary that's coming out about James Hemings' life and talks more about how he not only brought macaroni and cheese, but French fries, French vanilla, all these things to the United States. So you can thank him for that. But when he was coming back, he said he didn't want to. He said, we're free in Paris. Let's stay here. I'll be here to support you. I'm with you. But at that time, Sally Hemings was pregnant with her first child. And Jefferson said, return back to the U.S. with me. If you do, I promise to free all of our children at the age of 21. And wouldn't you know it, he upheld his promise. Another point to the fact of him being the father, he wasn't in the practice of necessarily buying or selling slaves, but he did free all of his children with Sally Hemings at the age of 21. Now, a lot of people say freed. Two of the children were allowed to run away. He was all into documentation. He documented things down to the seeds he was planting. And he documented that the two younger children ran away. But their form of running away was giving them $50 and putting them on a stagecoach and letting them be seen to safety. And they were so fair-complected that they passed into white society and moved off. And some of them, we still don't know where their descendants are because they don't know who they are. And the other two were able to, once he passed away, they were able to get their freedom after that. But again, he wasn't in the practice of doing that, but yet he still owned over 600 slaves during his time. So a lot of people say, but he was a good slave owner. Is there such a thing? I don't think so. Not to me. And the thing was, when we talk about him not being an abolitionist, he had the power. He did, in the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, try to write in there that African Americans should, well, Africans at that time, the slaves should be freed, that they should be able to go to their own land or go back, as he believed that if they were freed here in the U.S., that they would revolt and take over and kill off all the slave owners. And so he said, if we're freed them, we should send them back to Africa or send them back to another land where they can be separate from us. But the people who were also writing the Declaration of Independence, they chose not to do that, and that didn't stand. But he still had the opportunity, and I believe that he could have done more. He could have done more to free the people on his plantation, to maybe make them, give them free land. He has so much land. If anybody's ever been to Monticello, you know it's beautiful, so much land. He could have given them their own land there and freed them or made them indentured service. So many opportunities, but that's one of the things he failed on. And a lot of people will say, well, why didn't he? He was in debt, y'all. Jefferson liked to spend money. He died hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt at that time. So you know it was a lot of money equivalent to today. He died so much in debt that they had to sell off the slaves after he died. They had to sell off the home just to be able to pay off some of his debts. The Library of Congress, do you guys know how we have the Library of Congress? He loved collecting books, reading books. He was a genius, and they had to sell off all of his books because he was in debt, and that's how we got the Library of Congress started. So his, I don't know if he was a hoarder or what was going on, but he liked to collect things. He liked to get things from faraway lands. He liked to spend lots of money on Lewis and Clark's expeditions. So many things that he did, living his lavish lifestyle caused for him to go into debt. He built, let me say, I was about to say he built Monticello. Y'all know he ain't built nothing. Let's be real. We know who built it. He had the slaves build Monticello, tear it down. He was like, I don't like that. Rebuild it again. And he always were making these experiments and these creations and these improvements that he was doing throughout his life. So that's why he died so much in debt. And speaking of building it, if you ever go to Monticello on the back portico, and if you look at some of the bricks and the side of the buildings, you can see small little fingerprints in the bricks. The slaves there, mostly children, were making the actual bricks to build the house. And because they were so hot at certain times, they had to make sure they cooled. And sometimes when they were building with them or when they were moving them from place to place, they weren't cool yet. So their fingerprints would make indentions in the actual bricks. And you can still see their little fingerprints in those bricks to this day. And you go up there, and it's just so amazing the history that you can get out of some of the things you see at Monticello. I was lucky to actually have an opportunity to sleep at Monticello. For the first time, they did this immersion experience where they allowed a few of the descendants to actually sleep at Monticello. And it was an amazing experience. Now, the first time, I did it twice. The first time I did it, I went in like, look at here, y'all. I don't want no spirits talking to me. I don't want no chains are rattling. I ain't trying to hear none of that. I'm just going to sleep here and call it a day and wake up tomorrow and take some selfies. Like, hey, I did it. But the second time, I was like, okay, God, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to be open-minded. I'm just going to go in and just let whatever happens happen, right? So the first time I slept in a slave cabin. It's a replica of a slave cabin. I slept there on a mud floor. It got so cold at night, y'all. And then I was thinking about what the slaves went through. They would only get new clothes like once a year. So they didn't have blankets. They didn't have pillows. They didn't live in comfort and cushy beds, you know. So being there and trying to go what they went through, and just that moment, I was like, oh, I couldn't have been a slave, y'all. I'm too bougie to be up in there being a slave. It wouldn't have worked for me. That ain't the way my life is set up right about now, you know what I'm saying? But just to experience a glimpse of what it could have possibly been like for them. The next time I did it, I said, okay, I'm going to be all in. And this time, there was a meteor shower that night, so I was on the back patio trying to see the meteors, and then I accidentally fell asleep on the back steps. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I went inside. This time I slept in the house. If you've ever been there, the bottom of the house, they have these underground tunnels so the slaves can move throughout the house without being seen by the guests. So I went down to the wine cellar, and I slept in the wine cellar, and it had these sort of like barricades up, the railings up so people can't touch the wine. So I roll over in the middle of the night, and I open my eyes, and I look at these railings right here, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I was like, I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't know what was happening. And it was at that moment I felt possibly what my ancestors could have been feeling at that time, that I was in captive, that yet there were no shackles on me holding me down, but these these bars were right there holding me from escaping from this room. I couldn't even breathe or catch my breath. And at that moment, I had the most deepest connection with my ancestors that I've ever had in my life, because I opened myself up for that experience. And I just began to cry in that moment, thinking, is this what my ancestors felt like when they were at Monticello, this beautiful mountaintop with these beautiful sunrises and sunsets? But would my ancestors look at this place and say it's beautiful? Or would they say, here we go again, another day of sweat, another day of blood, another day of tears putting into this place to make it beautiful? And yes, I can only imagine what it was like, but I didn't have the shackles. I didn't have the slave owners yelling at me or the overseers yelling at me. I didn't have to fear them busting down my door, raping my wife in front of me. None of that was happening to me. And just think of all the smells that you would have to smell at a plantation, between the animals, the people not being able to bathe, but yet they're working day in and day out, the sweat going into the blood, all of these things that they had to endure, and yet they did it day in and day out. That's what I felt in that moment. That's the experience I had at Monticello, and it was just impactful just talking about it. It gives me chills even to this day, experiencing and talking about that impactful opportunity that we had to sleep there. But it just makes it more of a reality for some people to understand what they went through, that they didn't have the lives that we have. They didn't have the luxuries that we have. But it's because of their sacrifices that we are here today. It's because of everything that they did that we have the opportunity to be free, to be in communities where we can own homes and have things that our ancestors never had. And I try to teach that to my children, but I also try to teach my children that we didn't just come from slaves. We came from the strongest people ever created on this earth, that can endure the unthinkable, that can go through life, go through things that people can't even imagine and survive. When people couldn't survive the Middle Passages, months, 3 months, going across sea, people were dying, people were committing suicide, people were jumping overboard. Our ancestors, who we come from, they made it. They survived. So yes, we come from kings, we come from queens, but we also come from the strongest people possible. So how dare we complain about our lives and the little troubles that we have? When I want to cry and complain about some of the things going on in my life, I'm like, thank God that my ancestors went through it so I didn't have to go through it. Thank God that they did all those things so I can have the opportunity to even be alive. So how dare I complain about what's going on in my life? I just give glory to God in that moment and say, oh, only but there go I, but the grace of God, so I didn't have to go through those things. So just think about that when you're not having a good day, when you're having a bad day and you think things could go worse. It's just the worst day ever. No, somebody definitely had it worse than we had it in that moment. So just something for fruit for thought to think about. So sometimes when you're going through bad days, but that's one of the things I try to instill my kids, especially because they're getting older. They're 11, they're 9, they're 6 right now, to have 2 girls and a boy. And I try to make sure that they know they come from greatness. And you guys that are sitting here come from greatness. So never forget that. Never forget where you come from. It goes much further than just slavery. But a lot of people want to focus on Thomas Jefferson and my ancestry. So I'll stick with that a little bit. Because when I was also down at Monticello for the first time, I met my co-author, Jane Feldman. Now, I wasn't thinking about starting to write a book at 19, but at meeting Jane, and she wanted to photograph the family, Thomas Jefferson's descendants, both through his wife, Martha, and through the enslaved woman, Sally Hemings. And she wanted to get a picture of everybody together on the steps of Monticello. This was about in 1998, and she was told that would not be appropriate. They didn't want the picture to be taken. This was the staff at Monticello telling us we couldn't take a family photo because they didn't think it would be appropriate. But I said, look, this is my granddaddy's house. I walked up on the steps. I grabbed the microphone. I said, family, come up here for a family photo. Everybody come up here. And don't you know, everybody jumped on the steps. Now, there were a few people that was like, I ain't doing it. You know, stank folks. But they're the haters that are missing out. But majority of the families jumped up on those steps for the opportunity to represent each other as family. This family that had been separated for hundreds of years after slavery, now coming together to represent a multicultural family coming from the founding father. And that was a photo that Jane got that also went around the world. I remember Oprah had it on her show. So many people took part in that opportunity to jump on and make a difference, to say they're going to change the course of history. And I think one of the things that my family helps does is if they can teach us through the hardships, through the troubles, through the racism, through everything else that we have gone through, that we can still be family, that maybe other people in this country can still come together despite their differences and consider each other as family and start the reconciliation process that a lot of people still need to go through. The problem is a lot of people don't want to talk about slavery, or they are afraid to talk about slavery, or they're afraid of being blamed for slavery, that they don't want to talk about it. But we can't begin the healing process until we start to talk, until we start to recognize, yes, it did happen. This is not an imagination. And a lot of people think, oh, it's years ago. It's ancient history is when the dinosaurs. No, people are alive today that knew people that were slaves. Mr. Morris proved that earlier coming up here. People are alive today that knew someone who was either a slave or knew someone that was a slave. So it's not ancient history. It's not that far off. We were in slavery longer than we've been out of slavery. So just think of those things and trying to consider some of the things that you guys go through in your life and some of the people that you talk to when people are out there and they're trying to make a racist joke. Well, guess what? If you're not laughing at it, they're going to stop telling those jokes. So there are things you can do today to make a difference. Maybe you're not jumping on the steps taking a picture with a multicultural family, but the things and the decisions you do can affect how other people's behave and act. If someone is telling a racist joke and you're like, you know what, that's not cool, you shouldn't do that. Guess what they're probably going to stop doing? Telling the jokes. So you can start to make the difference in your household today. The behavior that you have in your household, things that your children are listening to, things that you're perpetuating in your lives, those things can stop and try to reverse the cycle, even if you were raised in a racist house. Jane and I, I'll tell you a few stories from the book. Jane and I toured around the country to meet other descendants of Jefferson, both through his wife Martha and through the enslaved woman Sally Hemings, and we put it in the book Jefferson's Children, the story of one American family. And through these stories, we're telling the family stories for the first time that had never been told. Sometimes it was through a historian or other people, but not the family. So for the first time, you were able to hear the voices. My cousin Dan, his name is Dan Hemings, and he was raised in a very racist environment. All his family members have Confederate flags tattooed on their body. And this is Dan's life. And Dan met his wife Mary at the time, and she said, I'm not raising my kids the way your parents raised you. I refuse to let my kids be racist. And he changed the cycle of racism in his family. He, at that moment, changed the way he was thinking and the way he was raising his children to think, and he did not raise boys that were racist. He did not have a Confederate flag tattooed on his body. His brother did, his father did, his other relatives did, but he chose not to and to change that cycle. So I think one of the brave lessons Dan teaches us, because we told Dan, you know, you're putting your face out there, people are going to know who you are. He lives in rural Virginia. I'm like, he don't even have a street name. He's like, just turn left at the Big Rock. And I'm like, I don't think we should be going over his house, but all right, let's go. So we went over there. I was afraid. I was like, let me just watch him. I'm like, this is my location, the Big Rock, y'all. If anything happens to me, I had to tell my family. But so it was, in all honesty and seriousness, that he could have been hurt. People could have put threats on his life because in that community, they didn't want to accept us. They didn't want us around. Again, this is a very racist community that he was still living in. But he said, this is the most important thing that I've ever done in my life, and it has to stop now. And if I have to take sacrifices for that, then it would be worth it. But he teaches us that no child is born a racist. It's something that has to be taught to them. Who has seen the Little Mermaid reaction videos lately? My children are one of those videos. Hey, Tina Knowles retweeted us. I'll just throw that out there. So my kids were going viral recently for the Little Mermaid reactions, but just showing that, you know, a lot of kids, whether they were black, whether they were white, watching it, they just wanted to love the Little Mermaid. They wanted to sing along. And it shows you that a lot of these things, they are taught. A lot of the differences that they're seeing are because they're seeing it in their household. So be mindful of what you're saying around these young people, because they are always listening. So that's Dan Hemming's story, and I thank Dan to this day for sharing his story and having the courage to share that story, because it has taught so many. We go around the schools and speak all across the country, and kids say, yeah, I'm not doing it. My parents said this and they said that, but I'm not going to live my life. I'm going to be like Dan and change the cycle in my family, and it's just so heartwarming to see that it's making a difference in that way. Another family member, Jill Sims. Jill Sims was raised thinking she was a white woman, but always feeling like something was missing, something else. Oh, I forgot. Did you guys catch Dan's last name? Hemmings. Dan Hemmings. Yeah. The best way to separate yourself from those Hemmings at Monticello is to say you're a racist. So you couldn't possibly be related to them if you're passing, right? Well, it happened in Jill Sims' family, too. Her family passed for white. Her great-great-grandmother was the first black graduate of Vassar College. But don't you know, when she was going to Vassar College, she was passing as a white woman because they weren't accepting black students at the time. 2 weeks before her graduation, her roommates and some of the other girls that were so jealous of her exotic beauty went out and discovered she was a negress, as they use in the term of the day. And they tried to stop her from graduating 2 weeks before graduation. You broke the law. You lied. You deceived everyone. You shouldn't be allowed to graduate. They almost stopped her from graduating. Vassar chose at the last minute to do the right thing and allow her to graduate. And now she's seen as a great source of pride at the university. But it could have gone a very different way for her. Interestingly enough, her brother, Frederick, was not as fair-complected as she was, so he wasn't able to pass for white. He was still a graduate of MIT, so it's just a smart family. But once she graduated from Vassar, she moved to New York and married another white guy. He was really black. He was passing for white, and he was a prominent surgeon in New York City. I said, I bet his patients never knew it was a black man working on him. Yeah, get it. But and the interesting thing is, like, a lot of times people don't understand passing. Do you guys understand what passing means? You are literally stepping into another community saying, I'm no longer going to live as a black person. I'm going to live as a white person. And that can be very dangerous. So a lot of times it wasn't, does anybody know why it was done? Give me some reason. Why would someone pass? A better life? Opportunities, jobs, safety, education, all these things. And sometimes it wasn't a choice. Sometimes it was a mother or a father saying, you're light enough to go on pass, so we're sending you up north to live with Auntie so-and-so, and you're going to pass and live up there. So sometimes it wasn't a choice, sometimes it was, but it was also, many cases, irreversible. Once you made that decision, you cannot go back to the other community. And we hear stories about siblings walking across from each other, not allowed to speak to each other, because if someone found out that they were passing, they could be killed. They could put threats on their lives. Grandmothers who would only see their grandchildren play once a year from across the street as they played in a park because she wasn't able to go up to them and embrace them. And sometimes if she did have to visit, she would enter the back door and act like the cleaning lady coming up to visit and take care of the children. But if anybody did see any inkling or time or anything about them, they would be like, oh, well, then there's going to be some threats on their life. So a lot was done to preserve and protect those secrets. My mother still gets sad today thinking she could be sitting at a diner with a cousin and not know it because they passed, and some of the families are still passing to this day. So I can't get to all the stories in the book. We don't have time, and I think I'm almost out of time right now. Marjorie's over there like, come on, wrap it up. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my life and opportunities that I've had to share the stories going around the country, speaking to people, and then also teach people that, you know, in saying those words that all men are created equal, yes, in Jefferson's time, he did not have an opportunity to make sure that those words were true. He said all men are created equal, but he didn't practice it, and it didn't become true in his lifetime. But as my co-author Jane Feldman always says, it's up to each and every one of us sitting here today to make sure that all men are created equal, that we can do as much as possible in our daily lives, in our personal homes, on the job, even in those times when it's uncomfortable to be confronted by some of those things, to say all men should be created equal and to act like that in our daily lives. So all of us in here, you got some homework to do. It's up to all of us to change the world one step at a time, but we can do it together. You guys say we can do it together? All right. Thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, you guys, before we end this thing, we have James Cage here with us. I'm sorry, Michael and James and Kazai. Clearly you probably thinking, why are these people here telling a story about their descendants that lives out in Washington and Maryland and things like that? What you don't understand or know, come on you guys, what you don't know and understand that we tie into the history of this country. And the reason I say that is because Mr. Michael Cage here and I, we network all the time. And the one thing that I know about Michael's family, that his family originated here from Terrebonne Parish. It was the Cage family. The one thing, we have these children to come together. This is James, so he's playing the role of James Cage.
It's actually James, but not named after that James.
Right. It's just so ironic. His name is James. So, all right, and this is Harry for the moment. So, Harry, you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to be here in Terrebonne Parish, and what was your role?
Yeah, I'm not very good at speaking in front of people, so y'all gonna have to forgive me. So my family came down from Tennessee. Several of the brothers came through Natchez, and settled in lower Mississippi and into the parish here. So I think the records show that James is about 1823, and I have records where they were in Mississippi in 1817, where my grandfather got married. So that's a quick overview. I could get into boring details, but.
And the story that ties in from Virginia and Maryland is that Thomas Jefferson, of course, like he said, was broke. And he sold his grandson, Thomas Jefferson Randolph. He sold one of Thomas's very first slave in order to help them with that debt, right? And so he sold him here to Terrebonne Parish. Actually, James decided to let me go in and find out who's this lady. I'm assuming they knew each other prior to this, because it's so ironic that Susan, Thomas Jefferson's daughter, Martha, she wrote the letter. And she says, we're having a problem with Susan. Susan is being honorary. She's bringing shame and disgrace to this family. Now, why she said the family? I'm assuming Susan may have been connected somehow. But, of course, she was a slave. And so Susan, being a strong woman, I thought, as a slave woman, she told him, I'm not going with Nicholas when he comes. I am going with James. And so Susan took it upon herself to go leave with James Cage. She and her 4 children came here to Terrebonne Parish. Susan, I introduce to you Susan Randolph.
I am Susan Randolph Cage. I'm a former slave of Thomas Jefferson. Me and my 4 children were brought to Terrebonne by James Cage, and I lived a free woman.
Sure did. James, you want to say something?
Okay, and James Cage actually the Cage family actually owned the Woodland Ranch, the Ashland, and also the ranch plantation. They were the largest slave owners here by the instructions of Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson actually said, we're going to get a crew together, we're going to get out here, we're going to do what they call, when they did that expedition, Lewis and Clark. Matter of fact, we have a family here by the name of Lewis. If you hear yourself with that name, it's only because you were sold down to the South Louisiana, and you were owned by the James Cage's family. So that's part of that Lewis and Clark. And they have one family here. Their family name is York. Actually, York had children before moving in that expedition with these guys. And actually, York's children ended up here in Terrebonne Parish. So we didn't bring these guys here on the mere grounds of just having them. We bought them because there's a connection. We are connected to the history of this country. So it just don't start with Susan. There's several others. Patty Whitney and I, we research all the time. We find so many wonderful stories and so many wonderful connections that come from up north. Because clearly, you know, when they said freedom was up and over and up north, they had to try to trickle their way down. And so that's what they did. They trickled from north to the or south to the deep south. And they started again their business here. So that's why we have so much a rich history here in Terrebonne Parish. So we didn't just start to tell these stories on the mere grounds of. It actually happened. So again, thank you, James. And and Thomas Mann. Oh yes. Let me Thomas Mann Cage. He was the son of Susan. Again, she did say she brought in 4 of her children. Her daughter, Martha, married a guy named John Budd. John was a Negro sheriff here, one of the first Negro sheriffs here. And then also Thomas Mann Randolph Cage, he was one to leave through the Underground Railroad with the help of Harry. And what Harry did was brought 8 of those children to New Orleans. And he met with this guy called Levi Coffin. Are you familiar with that Coffin guy? Yes, Coffin Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. These guys was all working side by side to help get people to freedom. And so Levi Coffin, you'll see a picture of Levi on that back wall over there. But Levi actually met with Harry in New Orleans, and he gave him eight children from Terrebonne Parish. They made it through the Underground Railroad. Thomas Randolph Cage, he went on to college. He went to France. He learned all that he had to. And he came back, and he taught the people here how to properly grow sugar cane. So believe it or not, when people think that, oh, this happened only because, there is a piece here. Actually, we borrowed this piece from Southdown, and we did learn that this is how they measured the sugarcane rows. And only because of Thomas Randolph Cage, this stuff was taught to the people here in Terrebonne Parish. So, Susan, I thank you. Thank you for bringing it. So again, thank you guys so much. You want to say something?
No, I don't. And Vance Lewis also.
Yes, Joseph Vance Lewis. Is Joseph Vance Lewis here today? I know you're in the crowd, Joseph.
Is this his father that I saw the picture of?
This is Joseph Vance Lewis. And we actually had someone to actually play that role. I don't know. Curtis, is you Joseph Vance Lewis? All right, if we don't have Joseph, I'm sure we have Dr. Collins. Dr. Collins, are you here today? Okay, Dr. Collins is not here either. And all of these people came in off the Cages plantation. And not only that, we have one doctor in particular we would like to come forward. Okay, here's Dr. Collins, you guys. He's got this thing in his eye. Thank you.
Good evening, good evening. Okay, I am Dr. C.S. Collins. I was born in Homer, Louisiana in March. Can you hear? What up? You can hear me now? Okay, I am Bishop C.S. Collins. I was born in Homer, Louisiana in March 1867. I went to Terrebonne. I went to Terrebonne Parish Schools. I received, in 1893, I went to Leland University, where I received my Bachelor in Arts. In 1910, I also went to Flint Medical College, where I received my medical degree. I was baptized by S.T. Smith at Little Zion Baptist Church. After that, I was called into ministry, where I became a pastor at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Homer. I was selected as secretaryship in the 5th District Sunday School organization, and I was the president of the Homer Academy. My interest was always being for the love and social being of our community. Thank you.
You know, we have one other doctor that we want to call up because he did something very significant in regards to medicine. But I'll call up some of these guys, and they'll just walk through, and you'll know their names. All right, we have Dr. T.L. Welch. Now, T.L. Welch was one that had an opportunity to meet with Booker T. Washington. So, Kenneth, is it all possible for you to come and meet T.L. Welch in this day and time?
Good evening, all. Oh, I got to hold it? Okay. My name is Dr. T.L. Welch II. You got me? Okay. My name is Dr. T.L. Welch II. I was born here in Terrebonne Parish on September 25th, 1882, to Reverend Thomas and Sarah Welch. I attended the Homer Academy in 1894 and graduated in 1898. After that, I pursued my studies by going to college in New Orleans and graduating from Flint Medical College. In 1907, jumping ahead, in 1907, I married my high school sweetheart and the love of my life, Miss Susie Dumas of Homer, Louisiana. And we moved to Crowley, Louisiana, where I started my first medical practice. The next year, she gave me 2 beautiful children. And in 1911, we relocated to New Iberia, Louisiana, where I continued my medical practice and I started my own pharmacy. I became the president of the New Iberia Business League for Negroes. And in this capacity, I was able to meet, as he came through Louisiana on business, one of the most iconic brothers of that time, Dr. Booker T. Washington. My father, Reverend Thomas Lee Welch, was the second worshipful master of Blaine Clay Lodge here in Terrebonne Parish. And from him, I found a love for serving in social, civic, and fraternal organizations. I was on practically every medical board that a Negro could be on at that time. And I also joined the Odd Fellows, the Knights of Pythias, and the Household of Ruth. Thank you. My name is Dr. T.L. Welch II.
Dr. T.L. Welch, I introduce you to Booker T. Washington. Okay, we have another doctor coming through. Give me your name, doctor. I done dealt with so many doctors, you guys. I'm like.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Vance Lewis. I was born in the year of 1863, enslaved here in Terrebonne Parish. Okay. Throughout my life, I acquired many labels such as attorney, educator, businessman, doctor. By the year 1890, I attained my first college degree from Leland College, located in New Orleans, Louisiana. By 1897, I attained 2 more degrees from Michigan, as well as Chicago College of Law. I practiced law all through the state of Illinois. I was also admitted to the bar by the United States Supreme Court. In 1901, I decided to settle in Houston, Texas. By 1920, I had an autobiography published for me. My life expired in 1925. My life's work was dedicated to traveling all across the United States, encouraging African Americans to work hard, educate themselves, as well as pursue their goals. In the year 1985, my home in Texas was listed on the National Register of Historic Landmarks. Again, my name is Louis Vance, Dr. Joseph Vance Lewis. I thank you for having me.
Now, Joseph Vance Lewis, he was actually, he was owned by James Cage. Yes, he was owned by James Cage. And notice the name Lewis. It came through that research with Lewis and Clark. Last but not least, we have one of the other doctors. You guys are going to be, look, this doctor is going to blow your mind, believe it or not.
I am Dr. Russell Wolford Brown. I was born on January 17, 1905, to John and Lizzie Brown in Gray, Louisiana. I first studied bacteriology at Howard University, eventually going to Rust University in Iowa State, where I received my Doctorate of Science degree. I was also a postdoctoral fellow at the Yale University School of Medicine. I then went to the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, where I held many positions, most notably Vice President and Director of the Carver Research Foundation. At one point in my career, I was also the President of the National Institute of Science. In 1955, a researcher I knew named Jonas Salk had created a polio vaccine which helped the immune system fight the virus. But Salk wanted to see if the vaccine was safe by observing the vaccine's ability to contest the virus. So I and Dr. James H.M. Henderson were brought in by Salk to test the vaccine on some HeLa cells, cells who were taken from a woman named Henrietta Lacks that were eternally duplicating. Dr. Henderson and I decided to put a sample of the vaccine into a sample of the cells, and the vaccine helped the cells fight the polio, and the vaccine was a success. Later that year, it was approved by the government and put out for mass use. Now there are no more cases of polio in the United States. During my time at Tuskegee, I also created the viral impenger, which injects foreign matter into a cell. I also worked in Carver University's tissue culture laboratory, where we produce mammalian cells on a massive scale. I also studied and wrote books on systematical bacteriology, physiology of bacteria, and virus and host cell relationships. I died in 1985 and was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in the city of Tuskegee. I am Dr. Russell Wilford Brown.
Dr. Brown, meet Booker T. Washington. Last but not least, we have one that was AKA, she too came in from Terrebonne Parish. And then after, we're going to end this program with a lovely song that's coming from one of the ladies that's also connected to someone here in Terrebonne Parish. I don't think it'll hit. Put it here.
I am an American philanthropist born on September 12, 1902, from Gray, Louisiana. I am married to an educator and a scientist, Howard B. Waxwell Jr., in 1929, and I am the sister of Dr. Russell Wilford Brown. I graduated from Howard University in 1925 and was a member of the illustrious Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I was a founding member of the New Orleans Alpha Beta Omega Graduate Chapter, the very first Black Greek letter sorority in Louisiana, which I later served as president of that chapter. I was the executive director of the Princeton YWCA, where my portrait still hangs. I was a charter member of the Central New Jersey chapter of the Links organization. And the term 100th day is coined after my visit to a local school to celebrate my milestone age of 100 years. After a remarkable and impactful life, I died at the age of 103. I am Susie Ion Brown Waxford.
Whew. All right, y'all, that's the end of this thing. Before we get off, we have a wonderful lady that's going to come, and she's going to render us a beautiful song. And I would love for my friend, Miss Margaret, to come, because I want you to be part of this. Let me tell you, this lady has stood strong. She says, Miss Margie, what you need? Miss Margie, what you want? So this is her, a piece of her family's history here. But I would love for her to come also to stand with us. Debbie, can you come, please? I have something. Debbie Artigo. Is that Debbie Artigo sitting there? Come on, Debbie, because I have something to give you. This book was found on the side of the road. Y'all know I'm a researcher. I don't dig everywhere. So my husband was passing one day, and he was like, this woman dig up everything. So this is a piece, and it's regarding the honoring Ellen Eleanor. And so I'm sure she can probably use this. I'm sure Terrebonne Parish will eventually open a museum. So that's a piece from Mr. Ellender that I would just like to give to the parish. Okay, so Miss Ruby. Come on, Miss Chlorine. I would like for Miss Chlorine. Miss Chlorine actually, Miss Chlorine gave us a picture of a midwife. And we thought the family was going to be here today. They promised they would come in. They was coming in from Texas. So I'm hoping nothing happened. But she gave us a picture of a midwife. And Miss Chlorine was here to present that to that family, but they're not here. So that midwife is Zenobia Talbert Thompson. Come on, Miss Chlorine.
I wonder I wonder, do you love the Lord just like I do? He gave his life for you and for me. Oh, I just wonder, I wonder, do you praise the Lord like I do? What he did for others was given to you. Are you safe and here content? Would your soul someday repent? Would you do a little good each day? And oh, would you show a child the way, just to know you have done your best? Will you praise God even in distress? I love the Lord, I love the Lord. I wonder, do you? Oh, sometimes I get so discouraged. Seem like all my work is in vain. Oh, when I don't bother the devil. Seem like he just loved to pick on me. But Satan, I want you to know that I'm truly God's child. And I'm going to serve him the best that I knows how. I love the Lord, I love the Lord. I wonder, do you? Oh, he died on the cross. Yes, he died for us all. I love him, this I know, and I'm gonna tell it, I'm gonna tell it, I'm gonna tell it everywhere I go, that I need Jesus by my side. I wonder, do you?
And again, that was another famous gospel guy that came through, Cleveland Williams, and that was her nephew. All right, so without further ado, we want to thank you guys for coming. Thank y'all for being so patient and hanging in here. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mike, James, Kazai. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And next time we're going to get some more of these medical doctors from McIntyre.